Chapter 10. The Troll. The weeks bled together like ink on parchment, endless days and nights blurring into one long line of study and silent dread. A second message never came, but that only made Hermione more nervous. Whoever had sent it, Varric, she was almost sure had to be waiting and watching. She knew that if she lingered on that thought, she'd crack. So she buried herself in work. Practically every hour that wasn't spent in class was consumed by study, transfiguration, charms, arithmancy, and more recently, the dark arts. She wanted to get on Varric's good side, after all, and had begun displaying a very visible extracurricular interest in the subject. She read theory after theory on mind-altering dark charms, and though their potential uses disgusted her, she couldn't help but be fascinated. When Varric had asked her, one cold afternoon, to explain the differences between coercion charms and ensorcelments, Hermione had recited 3 definitions, traced their lineage to Nordic and Byzantine predecessors, and even proposed a theory linking them through a shared conceptual model. Varric had smiled, faintly pleased, but unsatisfied. "You know what to do," she'd said softly, "but you still don't mean it." But Hermione didn't want to grow cruel. She didn't want to know what it felt like to mean harm. And yet if she didn't learn, Varric might do worse than push her in class. So she pressed forward. Her notebooks grew crowded with marginalia, ink running in frantic curls as she tried to connect everything musica universalis, spell structures, the rhythm between will and reality, Hope's law. Her efforts showed. She ranked at the top in nearly every subject, barring transfiguration and arithmancy, where Conrad was showered with praise by Masters Capel and Raskov, while she received little but faint nods from the former and nasty remarks from the latter. It was not an uncommon occurrence for her to leave arithmancy pink-faced and misty-eyed. Yet she ranked first even in history, taught by Master Iliv, whose good humor always seemed to dim when he called on her. Perhaps he enjoyed the debate, or perhaps her citations and logic outshone her foreign phrasing. And dark arts was even more perplexing. Varric continuously put her in the top spot, even though there were students who were better at the practical portions than her. Conrad and Peter Wren, in particular. Judging by Wren's glares at her, she wondered whether that was supposed to paint a target on her back. Although, in rituals, where most students barely bothered, it was not an impressive feat that she led the year. Her private project, a translation of age-old manuscript, a ragged compilation of Nordic rites she had named herself, absorbed her completely. Each page, with its half-formed attempts at magical structure, felt like a glimpse into magic's raw beginnings. It helped her understand the basic theory behind the sigils and shapes. They were learning beyond what the course books had spoken of, and had led Hermione to search for more specific ritual books to explain each of these primitive wizards' results. And then, of course, there was the place she learned all of this magic in, the library. The Durmstrang library was quite drafty, and the windows were rattled by increasingly forceful, icy winds as winter came. Unfortunately, fire was banned, and even warming charms were restricted to certain cases. The school believed in resilience no matter if they lived in freezing northern Scandinavia, all traces of that cheery summer warmth long gone. Emil slumped in his chair like a man resigned to execution. "I'm telling you," he muttered, stabbing his quill into an inkwell, "they're trying to kill us." No one assigns this much homework unless they have a personal vendetta. No one. Hermione, cross-legged on her chair across from him, didn't look up from her book. "It's not that bad," she murmured, eyes scanning a dense paragraph on magical will reinforcement. "You just procrastinate too much," Emil groaned. "It's that bad," he said. Thalberg gave us 12 pages on the symbolic correspondences of the astrological decans. Iliv wants an S, comparing Krumstreetais on heroic spellcraft o Eisensteffens in the Age of Giants. And Varric Lema help us wants annual presentation the ethics of dark intent. Who does oral presentations on the dark arts? Hermione turned a page. Someone who wants to check which students actually did the readings, I suspect. Emil scowled. So just you and Conrad then, Hermione snorted. And you too by tonight, she said. I won't let you leave otherwise. It'd be awfully irresponsible. The book before her had a title, Über den Willen und die Fessel, that gleamed faintly in faded silver. In English, this meant on will and binding. It delved into the underlying structure of compulsion, charms, the raw manipulation of consciousness. Reading it made her stomach tighten, but her mind soared. Compulsion is not domination, the text read. It is resonance misapplied. The target's will is not crushed, but retuned with the caster's guidance. She shivered a little. It was horrific, but the theory was brilliant. And the more she learned of it, hopefully, the less likely it was that Varric would reveal her secret. "Are you even listening?" asked Emil. She said vaguely, still tracing a sentence with her finger. "Yes, you're dying. Tragic. I'll attend the funeral." "What are your favorite flowers, so I can rest them on your headstone?" Emil huffed and slumped deeper into his chair. "Heartless. No wonder you love that dark book so much." "Of course I do," she said without looking up. "It's brilliant. Look, this part explains how compulsion doesn't just override free will, it incurs a suggestion in the subject's associative schema. It's not the incantation that matters, it's the symbolic imprint on the victim's perception of reality. The theory behind that is just fascinating, really." Hermione blinked then, two spots of pink appearing on her cheeks. "Not that I think the applications are, of course. I'm fascinated by the structure. It's a sophisticated form of layered charm logic, like the cheering charm but more advanced. Now go on with your essay. I'm sort of like your warden, remember?" They sat in silence for a few minutes, the comfortable kind, as Hermione read on, tracing diagrams of neurological feedback and symbolic resonance with an eager fascination, and Emil returned to writing his essay. Then the library doors opened with a faint creak and a peal of laughter. Hermione didn't need to look to know who it was. Astrid's voice carried like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, Lars, stop it. You're terrible." Hermione glanced up despite herself. Astrid was gliding between the rows of tables, her hand lightly resting on the arm of a tall, broad-shouldered boy with pale blonde hair and an easy, self-assured grin. Lars Winter. Emil froze mid-sentence, eyes fixed on them. He stared at them for one long second before dropping his gaze back to his parchment, expression blank. Astrid's face lit up as soon as she spotted Emil. "Emil," she called. She tugged Lars along, but the brightness faltered just a fraction when she noticed Hermione sitting across the table. "Oh, and Hermione, great to see you both here, studying hard, I see. You know, Lars, Hermione's only like 12. Practically a baby, but decided to skip all the way to third year. It's sad, really, that her smarts get overlooked because Conrad's so much better." Hermione's eye twitched. She was 13, just like Emil and Astrid. "Oh, I already know her," Lars said, grinning. "She's the British girl everyone keeps talking about, the one who's giving the professors a headache because you keep asking better questions than they can answer." Hermione flushed. "Oh, I don't know about that. I just like understanding things properly. But yes, Master Raskov doesn't seem to appreciate it too much." "That's the same thing," Lars said easily, leaning against the table. "I'm Lars Winter, fourth year and future dueling champion." Hermione couldn't help but snort. "Great to meet you then, Lars. Should I ask for your autograph now, or wait until that's actually true?" "Now, obviously," Lars said. His grin widened, a flash of white teeth. "That way you can sell it for more when I'm famous. It accumulates value, I think. Honestly, this place ought to teach people here about interest." "Obviously," she repeated, laughing. "So, if you're a future dueling champion, I assume you have some advice on how to handle Master Rommel. Because Emil and I are struggling awfully in actually pulling off the counterspells mid-duel. The only person whose moves I can actually anticipate is Emil, and vice versa. Oh, and the laps around the lake are a little, well, the less said about those, the better." Lars laughed. "Rommel's a nightmare, isn't he? He thinks torment builds character. But if you want advice, anticipation isn't about guessing spells, it's about rhythm. Every duelist has a rhythm. Rommel moves like a march, predictable but heavy-handed." Emil, his blue eyes flicked to the boy slouched across from Hermione. He seems like a Polska, quick, eager, all flair. You, on the other hand, seem like you'd rely on a lot of technique and difficult-to-master stuff, like air-hauling. But like with every dance, you two have to go step by step, and just they've to keep trying until those steps come naturally. Emil, who had been pretending to write, frowned. Are you comparing us to dances, and giving the Eastern European the Polska wonder why? You do know I'm from Velstria, right? That's Baltic. And yeah, my last name's Novak, but that's just because my great-grandfather is from Hungary, not Poland. And why's she theholing? Asked Astrid, narrowing her eyes at Lars too. Isn't that like Norway's favorite dance? Is it your favorite dance? Do I have to learn it? The Polska is my favorite dance, Lars said easily, grinning. It was a compliment. As for theholing, that dance is typically for men, Astrid. You know, sometimes I forget you don't know stuff like that. But I guess the difference is what makes us interesting, yeah. For some reason, Astrid shot Hermione a smug look upon hearing that he'd compared her to a dance for men. Yeah, muttered Emil, rolling his eyes. Swedish and Norwegian, I'm reeling. It's a real shock that hit wizards from the Kalmar Union haven't arrived yet. Response times must be awful there. At that, Astrid giggled far too loudly. Oh, stop it, Emil, as if the law could trap our love, she sighed dreamily, stroking Lars's arm. Lars flushed at that before turning back to Hermione and Emil. Compulsion charms, he asked suddenly, his voice cracking slightly as he raised an eyebrow at the book in front of Hermione. Bit dark for light reading, isn't it? Oh well, it's just theory, Hermione said hurriedly. I don't plan to actually cast any of these, and dark magic is encouraged in Durmstrang, so I really just want to get more used to it. I just suppose I like understanding everything, even things I'm afraid of. That earned her a smile and an approving nod. Good answer. Adorable, said Astrid. All that effort for things you'll never actually use. Are you sure you're not going to snap one day just so it can mean something? Hermione felt a surge of annoyance. Knowledge has value in and of itself, whether or not it is directly applicable. You'd know that if you knew anything of worth at all. Emil and Lars both paused before exchanging a brief look. Astrid narrowed her eyes, but tried to smile nonetheless. Maybe I don't know anything of worth, but knowing things of worth doesn't make someone worthy, no matter how they try. I'd have thought you'd be smart enough to realize that by now, Hermione. For a moment, Hermione recoiled. She opened her mouth, but didn't know quite what to say. You Ureffel, completely and utterly foul. She stood up, stuffing her books in her satchel. And you know what? At least I chase, after the approval of people who matter. Not to offend, but I really doubt that gushing about Lars is improving your ability in anything but appearing even more pathetic than you already are. After slinging the satchel over her shoulder, Hermione didn't bother to stick around to even see the look on Astrid's face. Knowing that Emil would be angry with her for daring to speak up against the girl he put on a pedestal. Goodbye, Lars, Emil. Oh, and once you finish that essay, do the reading, for God's sake, Emil. By the time Hermione reached her dorm, the orbs of spell light in the corridor had been dimmed to their faint nighttime glow. She slipped inside quietly, hoping Iva was asleep. She wasn't. She was perched up in bed, plaiting her hair with her wand. Hello, said Hermione, wiping a stray tear from her eye. She was exhausted of Astrid, but knew that what she had said might have just cost her her first friend. All Hermione wanted to do was slump on the bed and go to sleep. Potentially forever. Although no, that would mean missing class, and that couldn't happen. Hello, said Iva. She looked up then, faintly uncomfortable as she took in Hermione. She opened her mouth and closed it. Then, almost as if hating having to do it, are you all right? A full sentence. Hermione wondered, blinking. Yes, I'm quite all right, she said. There was an awkward silence then before. Oh, well, fine, I'm not. Astrid Isis, a little cockroach that needs to be crushed. She's summon, but does Emil ever defend me? No. He just lets her insult me, time after time, and I'm expected Tohat. Take it. It's exhausting. So yes, I may have snapped a little bit, but what I said was true. It was, I swear. Astrid's so horrid because she's not even really a fully formed person. She's like one of Emily's scribbles in terms of character. Honestly, of all the awful people I've met, Astrid has to be well. She makes the top 10 at least. There was a blink from Iva and more silence. Then, after what felt like an entire minute, Iva said, "You talk a lot." Hermione froze mid-rant, her mouth half open. I do not. I talk well, all right, fine. Perhaps I do sometimes, but I have so much to say. Some people, like Astrid, also talk a lot, but they need to shut their fat mouths because nothing coming out of there is necessary. I think Astrid's nice, said Iva, shrugging. If possible, Hermione's annoyance increased even further. Oh, look, Astrid's gotten to another person, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up. My roommate. Worse, my roommate who cannot be bothered to talk to anyone. Tell me, how does she do it? Is it compulsion charms? Entrancing enchantments? It has to be sort of magic at this point. Iva frowned faintly at that, lowering her wand so that the end of her braid fell against her shoulder. She doesn't need magic, she said. People just like her. Well, I don't, snapped Hermione. And I'm tired of being made to feel like that's wrong. Just because she smiles all the time and flutters her eyelashes at everyone doesn't mean she's good. She can act nice, but she's cruel, Iva, cruel. Iva tilted her head slightly, studying her. You sound like you hate her. I don't hate her, Hermione said quickly, but her voice wavered. I just loathe her methods, the fakery, the way she makes me feel like I'm the strange one for existing, and Emil just sits there like I'm a nuisance for not laughing along. It's ridiculous. I didn't come here to play her games, I came here to learn. Iva's wand had fallen still in her fingers. She blinked once, then said, You really care what he thinks? That's not, Hermione began, but the rest tangled somewhere in her throat. He's my friend, my only friend. Of course I care what he thinks. He's just frustratingly spineless sometimes. Novak is weak, Iva said. It's likely why Astrid likes him. She can say anything and he won't bite back, makes her feel powerful. That gave Hermione pause. That's awful. We all want to feel powerful. Astrid hates you because you threaten that. Not a threat, said Hermione. Emil looks at her like a puppy looks at its owner. It'd be cute and funny if it weren't so disgusting. I suppose Astrid sees it differently, said Iva, shrugging once more. Then she rolled over. Good night, Hermione. Hermione sighed, before beginning to prepare for bed herself. She didn't fall asleep quickly. Even after Iva's soft, steady breathing filled the dorm, her mind buzzed with anger. Even when she fell asleep, her dreams weren't awfully pleasant ones, except perhaps the one where Astrid fell off Durmstrang's cliff. Still, by morning, she shot up, getting ready with her typical efficiency. The great hall was buzzing with chatter, sunlight gleaming off the enchanted icicles that hung from the high rafters. Durmstrang's banners flapped lazily in the enchanted draught. Hermione spotted Emil almost immediately, mostly because Astrid was practically glued to his side, her laughter ringing out bright and sharp as glass. Astrid wasn't even sitting with her usual friends, Liv and Sophia. No, today she'd made it a point to sit pressed close to Emil, giggling with him over some doubtlessly stupid joke. Hermione froze mid-motion before simply sitting at a free seat and beginning to butter some bread. Astrid caught her eye across the table and smiled widely. Emil looked up too, his expression awkward, almost guilty, but Hermione simply looked away before he could. Fine, she thought, stabbing her toast. If Astrid wanted to make a performance of it, she could have the whole bloody stage. Hermione was not going to be part of it, and so she spent the rest of breakfast hunched over her porridge, pretending to work more on translating her copy off this age-old manuscript. By the time dueling class rolled around, she had almost managed to bury her irritation under a thick layer of academic focus. Almost. The training hall was large and cavernous, lined with burn marks and deep gouges in the stone floor from years of overzealous spell practice. Master Rommel stood at the front, his massive frame somehow making even the high-vaulted ceiling seem smaller. Attention, he bellowed the moment the third years entered. You will stand with a posture worthy of a duelist when you enter this class. Wands in hand, chins up, and eyes alert. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Master Rommel, came the chorus of weary voices. Hermione, who had learned early that Rommel took offense at anything less than military precision, snapped her wand up so fast she almost hit herself in the face. Better, Rommel barked approvingly. And what is the first rule off a duel, mister? Novik. Emil straightened immediately, though Hermione could see the faint dark circles under his eyes. I never lose focus, sir. Rommel's mustache twitched dangerously. Wrong. The first rule of a duel is, you are already losing the moment you think. You must act, you must flow, you must— He jabbed his wand toward Emil's feet and barked, Move! A jet of green light burst from his wand and hit the floor where Emil had been standing half a second before. Emil yelped and stumbled backward, colliding with the other students besides him. Peter Wren, a surly boy with a permanently sneering sort of look, looked outraged when Emil made contact with him. Watch it, he growled, pushing Emil forward, causing the smaller boy to pitch forward and fall to the ground. The class guffawed, while Hermione pursed her lips. Before she could properly tell Wren off, Rommel cut in. The second rule is that no hooray is ever safe, as Wren aptly displayed. Rommel paced back to the front, boots thudding on the scorched flagstones. Today's another counterspell drill, he declared, much to the disappointment of the class. Peter Wren's grin, wide with the thought of practicing all the jinxes and hexes he knew on his poor opponents, dimmed. The disarming charm and its counter. You think this is children's work? Then you lot are even more dim-witted than I thought. The masters of dueling perfect basics until their opponents cannot even blink before they've lost their wand. Now pair off. There was the usual scraping of boots and rustle of robes as students moved into groups. Hermione glanced briefly at Iva, who had teamed with Stig Svensson, then at Emil, who hovered uncertainly nearby. Well, Hermione said, raising a bushy eyebrow at him. She was still miffed with him for ignoring her for Astrid all day, but decided she'd rather duel him than any other. Since you so clearly need the practice. Ha ha, said Emil flatly. Fine, but if I accidentally disarm you so hard your wand flies out the window, don't cry, Hermione snorted. That'll be the day. They took positions opposite each other, 10 paces apart, wands at the ready. Rommel's barked command, begin, echoed through the hall. Expelliarmus, Hermione cried, her wrist flicking sharply. At once, Emil began the twirling motion of its counterspell, but it was too slow. The red jet of light smacked his wand aside with a loud crack, and it clattered to the floor. Now you cast the spell, Hermione said primly, lowering her wand. Emil retrieved his wand with a grumble. I wasn't ready. You never are, she replied, pursing her lips. He gave her a look, but instead of retorting, said, You know, Astrid's been really sorry about the other day. Hermione blinked, her wand still half raised. Has she now? She said she didn't mean to offend you. Emil went on quickly, clearly sensing danger. Didn't know you'd blow up like that. She can be sharp sometimes, but she's not bad, really. You two just got off on the wrong foot. I'm sure if you actually talked, Hermione interrupted with another flick of her wand. Expelliarmus. Emil barely managed to dodge, the spell grazing his sleeve. Hey, you can't hex people in the middle of A. I can when they say something as ridiculous as that, Hermione snapped. Astrid does nothing but make dig after dig at me, and am supposed to talk to her. You could try being less, Expelliarmus. This time he was prepared, the red bolt fizzling an inch before his chest. He looked genuinely pleased. See, improvement. You're deflecting the point. I'm not. I'm literally deflecting spells, she huffed, half a laugh slipping out despite herself. You're impossible, and you know you're replicating spells, not deflecting them. Maybe, he said, circling her slightly, wand raised. But Astrid's not the monster you make her out to be. She's nice. To people she likes. That's not kindness, Hermione retorted, sidestepping his spell. That's selectivity, she pivoted, sending a disarming charm that knocked his wand clean out of his hand again. By Tara's wand, Emil exclaimed, staring at his empty hand. Do yow ever miss? Hermione tilted her head. Well, when the target is actually moving, yes. Rommel's booming laugh filled the hall. Excellent form, Morgenstern. Novak, if you're trying to lose your wand faster each round, you're doing a great job, boy. The class burst into titters, and Emil gave her a rueful grin. You must really enjoy humiliating me. Not humiliating, Hermione said, handing him back his wand. Just motivating. He rolled his eyes, muttering, yeah, motivating me to transfer. Halfway through the lesson, Hermione was still catching her breath from her last round with Emil, beating him once more, when Master Rommel clapped his enormous hands together, the sound echoing like thunder. Now we switch, he boomed. If you've not yet embarrassed yourself in front of a new opponent, now is your opportunity. Then he began barking out new assignments, Drazik with Arnav, Petrov with Eriksson, Novak with Ren. At that, Emil let out a terrified sort of squeak into Hermione's ear. Peter Ren grinned widely, his wand already twitching. Morgenstern with Van Eisenwald. She froze for a fraction of a second, lowering her wand. Emil grimaced sympathetically, whispering, "Good luck," as he trudged off to face Peter Ren. Hermione straightened her spine, adjusted her grip on her wand, and turned to face Conrad von Eisenwald. Conrad stood with the easy posture of someone who never had to try too hard. His uniform was immaculate, his wand gripped with casual precision. He inclined his head in greeting. "Miss Morgenstern," he said smoothly. "Shall we?" "Of course," Hermione said. "Begin," Rommel roared. "Expelliarmus." Hermione's voice cracked through the air, her wrist cutting a clean line. Conrad's wand moved in a deft twirl, a graceful, almost lazy corkscrew motion, and the scarlet bolt of her spell dissolved midair, scattering harmlessly into red motes of light. "Good start," Conrad said pleasantly, as if commenting on the weather. "Your wrist is steady, but you tense your shoulder before you cast. That tells your opponent what's coming, as did casting the spell right after Rommel said to begin. Personally, I would have waited." Hermione's jaw clenched. "Thank you for the kind advice," she said, and fired again. Expelliarmus. The same result, the same smooth, infuriating flick of his wrist. Her spell fizzled before it reached him. "Better," he said politely. "You adjusted your stance, but you're leading with your eyes." "Oh, am I?" snapped Hermione. "How terribly observant." "I try," Conrad said mildly, and for the first time sent a spell of his own. "Expelliarmus." Hermione tried to mimic his motion, twirling her wand just as he had, but her timing was off. The spell hit her squarely in the chest, and her wand flew from her hand, clattering to the floor. Conrad lowered his wand. "My apologies," he said sincerely, bending to retrieve it for her. Hermione took it back stiffly, cheeks burning. "No need. I'll just adjust my stance, shall I?" "Excellent idea," he said. They squared up again. Hermione moved faster this time, trying to anticipate his flick, to mirror the rhythm she'd seen. Her wand danced through the air, twist, sweep, parry, but Conrad's reflexes were unerring. His counterwhirl met hers perfectly, dispersing her spell into a faint pop. "Very close," he said, nodding approvingly. "You're improving quickly, Miss Morgenstern." Hermione gritted her teeth. "Thank you." Conrad gave another courteous little bow before casting again. She barely had time to start the counter-motion before her wand spun out of her fingers for the third time. "4 rounds, von Eisenwald," Rommel called approvingly from across the room. "You may yet be competent." "Trying to be, sir," Conrad called back, smiling for once. "You enjoy this, don't you?" Hermione said under her breath. He looked faintly confused. "It's not personal," he said. "You're actually not all that bad." "Better than Novak, certainly." A few meters away, Hermione saw Emil had managed to properly sidestep Rehan's spell. She felt momentary pride that was soon extinguished by him fumbling and falling over. Hermione sighed, looking back at Conrad. "Thanks, I suppose." She twirled her wand again, this time perfectly mimicking his fluid motion as Conrad cast his spell. The red spark of his incoming spell dissipated an inch from her sleeve. "Yes," she said triumphantly. Conrad smiled faintly. "Well done." But before she could gloat too much, his next disarming charm came faster, and she didn't have time to react. Her wand soared through the air again. He caught it neatly this time. "Still," he said, handing it back, "progress." "Thank you." Hermione said, trying to keep her tone civil, though her voice trembled with equal parts irritation and admiration. Rommel's voice boomed once more. Excellent work. Some of you are improving. Others are providing excellent examples of what not to do. Looking at you, Petrov. Next class, I expect a 2 feet S, analyzing the duels between the Durmstrang dueling team and those Pigerton folks. Remember, that match is on Saturday, and I expect you all to attend. As the students began filing out, Conrad inclined his head again. Good duel, Miss Morgenstern. Truly, you learn quickly. Hermione forced a smile. Good duel, Mr. von Eisenwald. You're every kind. He blinked, clearly uncertain if that was sarcasm, then gave a curt nod and turned away. As Hermione left, her jaw tight, Emil jogged up beside her, red-faced and still rubbing his shoulder from impacting with the stone floor so often. Good class, huh? He said, a little too brightly. Hermione shot him a look. You spent half of it fumbling your wand and the other half defending Astrid. She's not that bad, he protested, already sounding tired of his own argument but too stubborn to drop it. You just have to talk to her properly. She can be nice when she wants to be. Well, she hasn't ever wanted to be with me, Hermione snapped. And I don't need to talk to her, I need her to leave me alone. Emil sighed, kicking at a stray bit of stone on the corridor floor as they walked toward the next classroom. You two are like the nicest people I know, but the second you're in the same room, it's like watching two Velas fighting over a mirror. Maybe just try being civil. Civil, Hermione said. Right up until she decided to say I was worthless. That was well okay, yes, that was a bit rude, Emil admitted quickly. But she probably didn't mean it the way it sounded. Oh, so now she accidentally insults people fluently. He opened his mouth to reply, thought better of it, and just made a small noise of defeat. By the time they reached the gloomy threshold of the dark arts classroom, Hermione had just about stopped bristling. That peace lasted exactly 3 seconds, because Astrid was there. She was leaning lazily against a desk, all golden hair and immaculate posture, chatting with Liv and Sophia, who were both quite furiously giggling. When she saw Emil, she lit up like dawn. She called sweetly, waving him over. I was just telling Liv about how much you helped out with my numerology charts. You were amazing, like you're blessed with numbers, or something. Hermione felt something twitch unpleasantly near her eye, but Emil simply offered a bashful laugh and let himself be tugged to Astrid's side. The Swedish girl turned to Hermione then, beaming. Oh, Hermione, I didn't see you there. Still, must be excited for the lesson, right? You're Varrick's star student, after all. Well, thank you, Hermione said, trying to smile. I try to be a good student in all my courses. About the whole conflict yesterday, I'm really sorry, Astrid said shyly. I didn't mean for it to go so far. Didn't think you were that sensitive. Saw friends again, friends, gritted Hermione, stiffening as Astrid squealed happily and hugged her tightly before withdrawing. Emil, bless him, looked between them like someone stuck between two bludgers on a collision course. Right, so, he said too loudly, dark arts time, can't wait. Gonna hex the bollocks off of this class. You know, be the best students we can be and all that. Doesn't that sound fun? Astrid linked her arm through his and smiled sweetly down at him. Sure it does. You'll sit with me though, won't you? I just hate working alone, and it'll be even more fun with you there. Hermione watched them go, telling herself firmly that hexing a classmate was not right way to start the next lesson. Not while Varrick was already strolling into class, her dark hair pinned up with silver clasps, and a cream-colored cloak wrapped tightly around her lithe frame as she looked over the students. Quickly, Hermione took her typical place at the front. Good afternoon, children, she said in that calm, lilting voice. Today, we move beyond the simple manipulation of air currents you learned in charms and begin that movement. We will study the wind-tie hex ventiligo. Astrid whispered something to Emil behind Hermione, something that made him snort, and Hermione's grip on her quill tightened. Mistress Varrick's head turned slightly. Something amusing, Miss Lindström. Astrid froze, her face flushing pink. No, Professor. Good. I would hate for the beauty of the air to be lost on those too busy wasting it. A few students chuckled. Astrid smiled and laughed along as though she found it all terribly funny, but Hermione could tell her jaw had clenched. Varric turned back to the class, her gaze landing inevitably on Hermione. Miss Morgenstern, tell me, what is the metaphysical distinction between Auwind and Aner? Hermione blinked once. Well, mistress, she began slowly, remembering what the coursebook had said. Air is potential, isn't it? A medium. Wind is that medium in motion, given direction by force or will. The wind charm creates a wind by acting upon the air, but the wind tie hex gives that motion structure. It's not just wind, it's wind given a purpose, to bind another. A faint, satisfied curve touched Varric's lips. Very good. Air is the passive element, wind is the active. But what happens when you foresee an element to act against its nature? What is the cost of compelling movement where there was meant to be stillness? Hermione hesitated. The students were scribbling notes furiously, but she could feel Varric's attention focused wholly on her. The cost, she said finally, is instability. The form resists, so the witch has to compensate with more intent, more pattern. And that's even reflected in the wand motions, isn't it, Professor? The wind charm has a simple V for its motion, because it represents simple descent and reascent, calling upon an invisible essence like air, gathering it, then sending it outwards with wizard-given intention. And it's not a closed symbol because it is free. Whereas the wind tie hex, Hermione continued, her voice gaining strength as she followed the thread, adds enclosure. The wand movement doesn't stop at the V, it loops back in on itself. It binds the wind's divergence into a spiral, creating resistance and cohesion. The caster imposes structure on what is naturally diffuse. Varric smiled outright this time, a rare expression that made her seem younger and more dangerous at once. Precisely. Pattern stabilizes power. You will all remember that phrase for your essays. Without the geometry of the wandfold, the air unravels chaotic, useless, and occasionally lethal. Every curve of the wand is a declaration, and every declaration leaves a mark. You may bind the wind for a moment, yes, but it is not meant to be so. Conrad raised his hand. Mistress Varric, how does this spell gain specifically enough violent intent to be considered dark? Varric's eyes flicked toward him slowly, deliberately. She regarded Conrad for a long moment before replying. A thoughtful question, Mr. von Eisenwald. The wind-tie hex is dark not because of its usage. It could easily be used for non-violent purposes, although its main applicability is in duels, but because of its philosophy. The class had gone still. Even Hermione's quill paused in its furious note-taking. In charms, she continued, gliding between the rows. The caster entreats one asks, air to move, persuades it to dance. There is harmony in that, but the dark arts do not ask. They compel, they demand obedience. Darkness lies not in the spell, but in the hand that bends. Her boots made no sound on the flagstones. The air grew faintly cooler as she passed. In this case, she said softly, you are not shaping the wind, you are ensnaring it. The spiral you described so elegantly, Miss Morgenstern, is a cage. Every loop tightens, constraining the flow. That tension, that violation of the element's nature, is what gives the hex its edge. It struggles, and in struggling, it cuts. Hermione scribbled the words down quickly. The conceptual basis of the magical theory was quite fascinating, and a relief after weeks spent on much darker spells. Then Mistress Varric lifted her wand and drew the motion in the air an elegant downward V, then a tight spiraling twist that closed upon itself. The air shimmered faintly. This is what you will practice today. The pattern must be clean, but the intent must be unyielding. The wind must believe it has no choice. Her gaze swept the room once more and paused, as always, on Hermione. Miss Morgenstern, you have the theory. Now let us see if your will can match it. With an almost lazy flick of Varric's wand, a large training dummy from the corner of the class began stomping towards Hermione. Her eyes widened, and her heart thudded. Her hands slightly shook, but her aim was true as she cast. Ventiligo. The air shuddered, then twisted sharply, coiling into invisible cords that lashed toward the target dummy. The ropes tightened instantly around its arm, locking it mid-motion. The faint whoosh of air had a strange sound to it, a sigh and a growl in one. Varick's dark eyes gleamed. "Excellent. Class, observe. You see how stable Miss Morgenstern's bind was. The spiral closed cleanly. No backlash, no diffusion. She compelled without chaos. Remember that. Darkness can always serve the disciplined mind." Despite herself, Hermione pinkened at the praise. Hermione dreaded natural magic days. Not because she disliked the subject, she found Thalberg's lectures on the correspondences between nature and soul enthralling, but because it meant spending over an hour partnered with Astrid. The greenhouse's warmth hit them as they entered. It must have been enchanted warm glass was typically not this efficient at insulating. Master Thalberg, his great auburn beard flecked with silver, was already arranging bundles of parchment on the central table. "Pears," he rumbled. "Your task today is simple. Find your assigned herb and bring me a healthy specimen before the bell. Remember to always prioritize accuracy over speed. And if it bites you do not wish to say you deserve it." But then he began reading from his list, tapping the parchment each time with his wand so that the names shimmered faintly in gold. Zoric and Varga Basiliscus Herba, Novak and Petrov Hellebore, Morgenstern and Nilsson Aglaophotes. Drazik and Nilsson, around them, students were frantically flipping through their coursebooks for reference. The greenhouse filled with the sound of frantic page-turning and murmured Latin, but Hermione didn't need to look. "Aglaophotes," she said, straightening her satchel. "It's a lunar herb with solar inclination, said to glow faintly under moonlight when approached without fear. Used as both a purifier and a corrupter depending on its context. In protective rites, it drives away illusion and deceit. In dark works, it calls on those same powers." Astrid blinked, halfway through flipping a page. "Oh," she said. "You know, you would have been so helpful when Liv and I invited the girls in the North Tower over to our dorm to study together. I invited Emil, but he was too busy studying with you. And judging by that look of surprise, I guess Iva didn't even tell you. Or pity that. I really wanted you there, you know." Emil was neither a girl nor a resident of the North Tower, so Hermione hadn't the foggiest idea as to why he would be invited in the first place. "It grows where opposites meet," Hermione went on, ignoring Astrid. "At borders, thresholds anywhere two essences collide. Oh, of course. It's probably in the ridge where the greenhouse meets the mountain's shadow. The soil's rather liminal there." At once, Hermione pushed open the back door, the cold air rushing in to replace the thick greenhouse heat. Astrid sighed long-sufferingly, following. "Honestly, Hermione, you could at least pretend to let me help. I am technically a partner, you know." "Are you?" Hermione asked, pulling her winter cloak tighter around her shoulders as they stepped into the sloping meadow. "Oh. I must have forgotten, after 2 months of doing all the work. But contribute all you like. Do you happen to know what a Aglaophotes looks like?" "Well, no," Astrid said lightly, hopping over a flower. "But I can cheer you on while you pluck it." "Does that count?" Hermione let out a long breath through her nose. "Remarkably, it does not." The field was dotted with crystalline frost despite the weak autumn sun. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks dark against the silver-blue sky. It was already darkening, sunset coming earlier and earlier with each passing day. Hermione crouched beside a patch of thick grass, brushing her gloved fingers across the soil. "If it grows at Allet, must be here Master Thalberg wouldn't have made us go too far. Am I missing something?" she murmured, half to herself again. "I don't know, perhaps we'd need to go deeper. Why are you asking me? Because you're my partner. And that means I have to help." Hermione's eyes flashed. "You just said, oh, whatever," she huffed, rising. They continued up the slope, the air growing colder, the grass thinning into patches of rough stone and brittle moss. They walked on for many minutes, until they were at the foothill of the mountains. Hermione worriedly began scanning the plants, trying to spot the herb, when suddenly a squeal sounded out. It wasn't human. It was high and sharp, a cry of pain. Hermione gasped softly, and Astrid clutched her arm. Then came the accompanying growl. Hermione turned toward the noise just as something crashed through the scrub at the ridge's edge, stones clattering down the slope. Two creatures burst into view. The first was a cat, but far larger than any other Hermione had seen. Its legs were too short for its body, its wispy fur a deep, oily black. Its eyes bulged slightly, glassy and pale, as though they were too big for its skull. The cat's movements were frantic and ungraceful in its fear. The other a wolf. If the cat was abnormal in a way that demanded sympathy, the wolf was the opposite, terrifyingly perfect. Its fur gleamed silver-gray, catching the light with every movement, and its body moved with a predatory grace that froze the air around it. Its eyes burned amber, intelligent and cold, and the sound rumbling from its throat was more deliberate than wild. The two creatures collided the cat, letting out another strangled cry as the wolf's teeth sank into its flank, and the snow-spotted grass darkened beneath them. Astrid let out a strangled cry, and the wolf's head snapped up, its gaze fixed directly on them. At once, Astrid was gone from her side, bolting, but Hermione couldn't follow. She was frozen in place, staring at the wolf. She remembered this. The troll. The stink of it, the sound of its club dragging across stone. The knowledge cold and certain that she was about to die and that no one would reach her in time. The wolf crouched, muscles coiling under that perfect, terrible pelt. The ground seemed to tilt toward it. Hermione's hand trembled. She thought she screamed, but no sound came out. Ventiligo. But it was not Hermione who cast it. Astrid's voice rang out behind her, high and desperate. The air cracked, and a sudden lash of invisible force twisted through the space between them. The wind-tie hex struck the wolf's shoulder, bursting into coils of whirling air that momentarily tangled around its front leg. The creature snarled, snapping through the ropes of wind like they were cobwebs. It was not a perfectly cast spell, but it still stumbled. It was like a bucket of cold water dumped over her head. She gasped, hard and loud, the world returning in brutal clarity, because of the sheer shock that Astrid, of all people, had stupid for her. Astrid was standing halfway down the slope, her wand raised, her expression stricken with a mix of terror and furious determination. "Hermione, move!" she yelled. But the wolf turned back to her, its gaze wild. It snapped out of its invisible chains. It lunged, a blur of muscle and teeth and movement. "Ventus!" shrieked Hermione. A powerful gale exploded outward from her wand, catching the wolf mid-leap and hurling it backward like a rag doll, slamming it into a cluster of frost-blackened shrubs. A spray of snow and shattered ice was sent glittering through the air. Hermione's heart thundered in her throat. "Stupefy!" she gasped, snapping her wand toward the moving shadow, but her hand was shaking, her eyes stinging, and the red jet went wide, sizzling harmlessly into the rocky ground. "No, no, no," she muttered, trying to remember every lesson, every diagram of spell models and focus anchors, but her mind was white static. The wolf staggered upright, its lips peeled back again, confusion and fury flashing through its eyes. But once again, Astrid was faster. "Confundo!" The beast froze for a moment, its head jerking as it swayed. It shook its head, as if trying to get its bearings right. It growled in confused frustration, but before it could remember its purpose, Hermione cried, "Confundo!" as well. A low whine came from the wolf as it blinked once, twice its murderous intent melting into pure bewilderment. For a long, dreadful moment, it simply stared at Hermione. Then, as if forgetting entirely why it had come, it gave a low, uncertain huff and turned away, disappearing among the grey trunks and rocks. For a moment, neither Astrid nor Hermione spoke. The only sounds were from their shaky breaths, but Hermione swallowed, looking at Astrid. You came back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Astrid swallowed hard, lowering her wand as if remembering she was supposed to look effortless. Her hair had come loose from its perfect braid, a pale strand sticking to the corner of her mouth. She brushed it aside quickly. "Well," she said tremulously, That was dramatic. Nothing to make such a fuss over, though. Just a wolf. Just a wolf? Hermione asked, almost hysterically, her pitch heightening. Oh, yes, just a tiny little wolf. I can't see why we didn't adopt it. It's just a wolf, after all. She stalked off then, trying to find where the black cat the wolf had thrown went. Astrid followed. Well, Inoue, I can see why somebody like you might find it intimidating, but here at Durmstrang, we know non-magical animals are not to be seen as terrifying. I bet Lars could have taken it in like 3 seconds. Hermione glanced at Astrid's shaking hands. Are you really talking about Lars? She asked. Right now, of all times. Of course I am, exclaimed Astrid desperately. What else am I supposed to talk about? How I almost became wolf food. And it was to save you. You, of all people. God, I'm just too nice for my own good. That's always been my problem, you know. I give, and other people take. Now, back onto the matter at hand, do you think Emil's trying to steal Lars from me? I mean, you clearly were trying to, were practically throwing yourself at him, but Emil was acting so coy. Did it intrigue Lars, you think? Are you two even dating yet, or are you just very pushy? Asked Hermione curiously. Pushy, she echoed, scandalized. Excuse me, I know. I'm not, she broke off, her indignation faltering into something less certain. Well, Lars hasn't agreed to a proper date yet, you see. Unbidden, Hermione snorted. Oh, what did you say again about not being pushy? A glare, more embarrassed than hostile, came from Astrid. You. I saved your life, you little bint. You know, this is why I hate children. No respect for their elders at all. Hermione was about to respond that she was the same age as Astrid before she gasped. Oh yes, I've found it, Astrid. Verb. The black cat, the reason they'd been attacked at all, was lying several yards away, half buried in the snow where the wolf had thrown it. Hermione darted forward at once, slipping over the slick ground. Astrid followed more slowly, still breathing hard, but trying not to show it. The cat looked up at Hermione weakly and made a low, pitiful sound, somewhere between a mewl and a groan. Not the herb, then, muttered Astrid with much disappointment. Oh, you poor thing, Hermione whispered, crouching beside it. It didn't flinch when she reached out. It's hurt. Astrid, help me, please. Astrid hesitated, then sighed, kneeling reluctantly beside her. You're serious? That thing's probably diseased. I've never seen a balding cat before. It's not diseased, Hermione said, brushing the snow from its side. It's probably just hurting. It doesn't look wild, so why's it in the mountains? Astrid frowned but leaned a little closer, then suddenly went pale. Her breath caught sharply in her throat, and she stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root. Get away from it, she hissed. What? Why? It's hurt. Astrid shook her head furiously, wand half raised as though she meant to hex the thing if it moved. That's not a normal cat, she whispered. It's a troll cat. A troll cat, Hermione repeated, uncertain, her mind conjuring half-formed images of that club-wielding monster. But it doesn't look like a troll at all. It isn't, Astrid interrupted sharply. It's alchemical, aecuration, not a natural beast. Her voice had gone high and tight, her bravado cracked with unease. Witches make them. They're like a homunculus, only animals. They spy for their mistresses, curse their enemies, steal things, bits of hair, bone, breath. Therafamilias that obey commands to do harm. Hermione looked back down at the creature. It didn't look harmful. It blinked up at her, its huge eyes glassy with pain. That's absurd, she said firmly. It's half dead, not half evil, and we mustn't just let it die. You don't understand. There are stories, one about a midwife who wronged a witch, and the witch sent her troll cat to suckle her milk dry so her baby starved. Theodovel, Hermione. That's what they're made for. The troll cat shifted weakly, a low purr or maybe a wheeze vibrating through its ribs. Then you don't blame the creature, Hermione murmured, slowly picking up the creature and cradling it. You blame the witch who told it to. Astrid made a face. You can't be serious. But Hermione barely heard her. She was staring down at the creature, her mind racing. A slow, sinking suspicion twisted in her stomach, irrational, maybe, but impossible to dismiss. Mistress Varric, with her fond smiles and praise. Mistress Varric, who had blackmailed her, she was sure. It couldn't have been a coincidence for a creature made for surveillance to have been caught so close to them. Perhaps the wolf hadn't been real either. Perhaps it had all been some sick test. Still, Hermione rose, the cat against her chest. Regardless of what it is, it's hurt. And I'm not leaving it here to die. That belong, Astrid. You're insane, the other girl breathed, stepping back. Perhaps. But I'm also right. It needs to go to the infirmary. And Astrid, the Aglaya Fotis is right by your feet. Would you collect it for me? If Astrid had any objections, Hermione did not hear them, already rushing back in the direction of the fortress. Chapter 11. Dark Days. The next day, Emil couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Hermione and Astrid walk into the great hall together, talking and smiling with each other. It was a strange sight, like seeing a griffin's claw and unicorn hair mix in a potion without exploding. He blinked once, then twice, to make sure it was correct. Hermione giggled at that, and so did Astrid. What happened? He demanded when they reached the table. Did one of you curse the other and forget about it? He narrowed his eyes at Hermione then. You were reading up on compulsion charms, weren't you? No curses, said Astrid, snorting as she sat opposite him and in between Liv and Sophia. Just a little talk by the cliffs this morning. And you didn't push her off, said Emil, astounded. Hermione gave a nod, her bushy hair bobbing. It was a perfectly civil conversation, she said primly. We've decided to look past our differences, perhaps even become friendly if not friends. Emil blinked again. Friendly. He glanced between them, suspicion clouding his expression. Your SRO didn't hit your heads on the way back. You're too dramatic, Emil, said Astrid, giggling. You really are, you know, agreed Hermione. Dramatic. Me, I'm the dramatic one. Emil's eyes darted between them, torn between confusion and relief. Then, cautiously, he began to grin. Well, I guess this is good, right? Great, even. He gave a satisfied little nod and resumed eating. Astrid began whispering to Liv and Sophia, who both kept sneaking glances at Hermione, clearly trying to adjust to this new development. Hermione, for her part, tried to ignore it and focus on her sludge-like porridge. The rest of the day passed in a blur of lessons, each one layering itself atop the last, until Hermione's mind felt like it was spinning with spells, sigils, and theories. Charms had gone quite well. They were beginning their unit on the gouging spell, a notoriously destructive charm used to cut through solid matter, but Mistress Merle had forbidden any practical casting until the following fortnight. For now, they were just taking notes on the theory as she lectured. Hermione, having used the foundational logic of Forsuaker's supplemental reading to prepare, found herself at the center of attention. One innocent question about the interaction between Adebio's axioms and Markov's principles sent Mistress Merle into delighted rapture. The two of them spent the rest of the lesson in animated discussion. By the time the bell rang, Merle had entirely forgotten the homework she'd meant to assign before Hermione had reminded her. Of course, and Hermione left the classroom flushed with pride. Transfiguration had been more humbling. Their task was to transfigure small brass keys into living creatures. The rest of the class worked on turning it into spiders, but Hermione and Conrad had already progressed past that, so Master Capel made them turn it into slugs. Conrad, naturally, had gotten it first, after only 20 minutes. His key had melted seamlessly into a perfectly plump, glistening slug that had begun to crawl across his desk with almost indecent vitality. But her worst subject, by far, had been dueling. Hermione excelled in the theoretical portions, the quizzes on different wizarding wars, the essays on tactics and spell choice. But when Master Rommel split them into pairs for live practice, Conrad had approached her immediately, bowing with irritating formality. Miss Morgenstern, he had said, tone impeccably courteous, may I request you as my dueling partner again? It was quite the pleasure last time. She had agreed, how could she refuse when half the class was already watching, but she already knew what the outcome would be. Every round went the same way. Hermione would raise her wand, focus her stance, and prepare to disarm him, and he would already have moved, wand flicking in a clean spiral that sent her spell sputtering before it could even form properly. "Good attempt," he had said at first, lowering his wand. "Your motion is too deliberate, though. You're thinking between each step. Flow don't measure." Then, a few moments later, "Better, but your balance is too rigid. You're trying top linear reaction instead of trusting it." Then, after the fifth defeat, "Excellent wand control. But your counters are anticipatory, not reflexive. You're reading intent, not direction." It was unbearable. When class finally ended, Hermione was still sore from the constant rhythm of being disarmed. Her wand arm ached faintly, her pride much more so. Emil trudged beside her down the corridor, dragging his bag as though it weighed 100 kilos. "Well," he groaned, "that was a complete disaster. I don't think Rommel even believes I can tell one end of my wand from the other anymore. I nearly hexed myself in the face twice." "Twice, Hermione." Hermione pressed her lips together, trying very hard not to smile. "Yes, I noticed, but at least you dodged the second one." "Barely," he said miserably. Rehan laughed so hard he nearly choked on his own smugness. "I'm sure Rommel's going to use me as an example next week. Observe, class, the posture of a boy who's never going to win a duel." "Honestly," said Hermione, "I think it went rather well." "You did improve by the end, didn't you?" "That's not saying much," he muttered. "Well, improvement is improvement," she said, in the sort of brisk, sensible tone that made Emil groan even louder. They turned a corner, the air growing cooler as they approached the wing branching toward the infirmary. Are we going this way?" Emil asked as they walked past a carved wooden sign shaped like a caduceus. "I need to check on something," said Hermione. "What's something?" "Something. That's not an answer." "Goodness, you're observant," she said sarcastically. They stepped through the arched doors into the infirmary proper. Half a dozen beds lined the stone walls, some hidden behind shimmering privacy curtains, others not. The unfortunate students occupying them looked like a walking advertisement for magical safety violations. A boy lay upside down on his bed, his hair and gravity apparently in disagreement, his legs floating lazily toward the ceiling. A girl on the next cot had half-melted hands that glowed like molten metal, and she was waving them slowly in front of her, muttering, "Still hot, still hot, still hot." One older student, apparently too proud for curtains, sat cross-legged on his bed with a chunk of ice fused to his head. The surrounding skin was a dark black. Another was reading serenely despite the fact that he was entirely invisible except for a single blinking eyeball. At the far end of the room stood a tall, cheery man in healer's robes of forest green healer frisk. His sleeves were rolled up, and he was humming something that sounded suspiciously like a waltz while sorting through a cabinet full of potions that sparkled ominously. When he saw them, his face broke into a wide grin. "Ah, Miss Morgenstern, Mr. Novak. Don't tell me you two have come to join our little gallery of catastrophes. What do you have?" "Must be quite unnoticeable." He peered at Emil, who shrunk behind Hermione. "No, sir," Hermione said quickly, though she was clutching her satchel clothes, eyes flicking nervously toward the floating-legged boy. "I wanted to ask about the creature I brought in yesterday." "The Arcat cat," Emil repeated blankly. Frisk blinked for a moment, then snapped his fingers. "Ah, yes, the patient. Surly little thing, but it's recovering well. Took a nasty gash to the shoulder, but that was just a flesh wound. Nothing a wave of the wand couldn't fix." "Don't worry, it's resting now." Emil turned slowly toward Hermione. "Yao brought a cat to the infirmary." Hermione straightened. "Yes, of course, I did." "It was hurt." "Yao brought a cat," he repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Durmstrang's infirmary, the same place where that boy over there's growing icicles out of his ear. And that girl's hands are melted." "Hermione, melted." "Don't be ridiculous," Hermione said crisply. "His ear is perfectly fine." "It's his scalp that's frozen," Frisk chuckled under his breath. "She's not wrong." Hermione ignored both of them, folding her hands. "May I see it, Healer Frisk?" "Of course, dear," he said warmly. "Though do mind your fingers. It bit an apprentice this morning. Twice." Emil paled. "You're joking." Oh, don't worry, lad, Frisk said, patting Emil on the shoulder. She's quite all right now, only a little green from the venom. It'll fade. Venom, he squeaked. Hermione blinked, but her resolve didn't waver. Well, she said slowly, if the cat's awake enough to bite, it's awake enough to be comforted. Wait, sorry, I'm still stuck on the venom bit. And as Frisk led them toward a curtained-off section in the back, Hermione could feel Emil's incredulous stare boring into her, but she didn't care. The curtain was thrown aside, and there it was curled up on a bundle of linen. The trollcat's eyes snapped open as soon as Hermione approached huge, bulbous things that glimmered in the spell light. Its fur was wispy and tangled, the color of soot, and its legs were stubby, almost comically so, though the claws at their ends were anything but funny. In short, it was the cutest thing Hermione had ever seen. Emil, peering over Hermione's shoulder, made a strangled noise somewhere between a squeak and a cough. Is that's Atrolcat, Hermione? But she barely heard him. She had already dropped to her knees, setting her bag aside and inching forward until she was close enough to reach out. Oh, you poor thing. The trollcat tensed as her fingers brushed its fur, then relaxed, blinking at her slowly. Hermione, Emil hissed, are you out of your mind? You're petting it. You're petting a trollcat. She glanced up at him, frowning. He's frightened and in pain. What else would I do? What else? Emil sputtered, waving his arms. I don't know, not touch it. May believe it to the professional healer. She didn't answer, too busy smoothing down the trollcat's ragged fur. Its tail flicked once, then it pressed its head faintly into her hand, letting out a low, rasping sound that might have been a purr or a growl. Hermione, Emil said, voice rising an octave, did Yowmacate? What? Of course not. Then how do you even know it won't curse you? He demanded, taking several nervous steps back. If you don't know who its mistress is, that thing could hex your hair off just for breathing near it. At that, Hermione hesitated. She didn't look away from the trollcat, but her fingers stilled slightly on its back. She believed she did know its mistress, in fact. Varek. If any witch in the school would send a creature bred for spying and subtle harm, it would be her. But aloud, all she said was, why do you assume Ithasto be a witch? Why not a wizard? Well, he scrambled for a response. Because it's a creature of deceit, indirectness, and evil remind you of any other group. Hermione's head snapped up, eyes flashing. Well, it's true, he exclaimed, hands raised. I don't mean you. But well, come on, what self-respecting dark wizard sends a cato do its dirty work? And it doesn't even kill. It's a bit girlish, no. Her glare could have burned a hole in his head. He swallowed and muttered. I'll just stand back here meanwhile. The trollcat blinked slowly, pressed its ugly head against Hermione's palm again, and let out another strange, wheezing purr. Slowly, Hermione scooped it up and approached Healer Frisk, the trollcat cradled in her arms like an awkwardly proportioned infant. Frisk raised his brows, clearly impressed. No bites, not bad at all. He set the clipboard down and leaned over, peering at the creature's twisted face. I never did get to tell you, by the way, it's Hermione blinked, startled. Oh, I never checked. It's a monster, muttered Emil, hovering a safe distance away. Hermione shot him a look that promised retribution later, then turned back to Frisk. He's still weak, though. Andy think he's frightened. I can't stand to think of leaving him here, alone. If I were hurt, I wouldn't want to be alone. Miss Morgenstern, trollcats aren't exactly harmless. They were made for rather dark purposes. If someone created him, we don't know what he's bound to do if. But his mistress, his creator, hasn't even come for him. Hermione cut in, her voice trembling with conviction. He was attacked by a wolf, and whoever made him didn't even care enough to retrieve him. He'll die of neglect or loneliness if he stays here, Frisk blinked. Well, technically, he glanced down at his notes as though they might provide an escape. Technically, he is still a cat, just a magically produced one. And school policy doesn't prohibit students from keeping familiars or pets of that classification. Hermione's eyes widened. So I can, the healer hesitated, then smiled wryly. I don't see why not, but you'll be responsible for him. And if he eats anyone's quills or anyone, period it's on your conscience. Emil, hovering a safe distance away, muttered, "I'll take full responsibility, I promise." Emil groaned softly. "Oh no. Oh, number Hermione, tell me you're not actually, oh, you are. You're really doing this." "Ian," she said firmly. The troll cat let out a sleepy, gravelly purr, its eyes drooping contentedly. "Do you even hear yourself?" Emil whispered as they left the infirmary, his voice climbing toward panic. "You just adopted a troll cat. That's like finding a cursed book and taking it anyway because, oh, but it looks lonely. Mind you, you'd probably do that unironically, but that's not smart, Hermione. It's just not." "Behemoth," Hermione mused aloud as they descended the spiral staircase, ignoring Emil. "From the Master and Margarita. He's a cat in that, too talking, clever, mischievous." The troll cat blinked, unimpressed. "All right, not Behemoth," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Watson, then, you can be my assistant. I can bounce ideas off of you, can't I?" The cat's too thin tail flicked in clear disdain. Emil sighed. "You're naming it. You've gone mad. You're renaming it." Hermione only smiled faintly, running her fingers along the cat's back as they reached the corridor that split toward the North Tower. "Puck," she tried. "From A Midsummer Night's Dream. He was a trickster spirit, mischievous, yes, but not cruel. And, well, it fits, doesn't it? My name's Shakespearean too, you know." The troll cat's eyes half-lidded and purred as it nuzzled against Hermione's chest. It was very likely that the cat was just sleepy and wasn't actually reacting to the name, but Hermione didn't care. Her face broke into a radiant smile. "Puck it is, then." As November wore on, winter fully claimed Durmstrang. The lake froze solid, snow swallowed the grounds, and the sun slunk behind the mountains by mid-afternoon, leaving the fortress lit by hovering spell orbs and the occasional irritable salamander prowling for warmth. Hermione adjusted quickly to cat ownership. She transfigured a scratching post, bowl, tag, and bed that satisfied Puck, and Emil helped her research trollcat care, though their diet proved nearly identical to ordinary cats, aside from a few unpleasant curiosities like pure-hearted tears or the last drops of a man's blood. Once Hermione officially registered Puck as her pet, food simply appeared in his bowl at mealtimes, sparing her the trouble. Iva, however, seemed far less pleased. Her constant glares suggested that Hermione should have asked, before bringing a pet into their room, something Hermione only realized afterward. Even so, she quietly decided to ignore Iva's disapproval rather than admit fault. What truly frustrated her was that Puck simply would not leave. Hermione had expected him to wander back to his creator, proving once, and for all that Varric was the one behind him. She even spent a week shut in the library, mastering a tricky spell called the Gold Trail Charm and binding it to both Puck's tag and a parchment so she could track his movements. But Puck never ventured beyond North Tower unless she carried him, and Hermione rather doubted Varric could slip through the student dormitories unnoticed. And so, her days slipped by in a comfortable routine of reading books, caring for Puck, and spending time with Emil, or more rarely Astrid. She had put a translation of Ysgeijold manuscript on hold, taken with other tomes from breaths of the Skytarth art of arthropod alteration. Hermione was quite swamped with the amount of magical theory she was learning. She only realized something was happening when she noticed how oddly purposeful the rest of the school had become. Students whispered excitedly in clusters. Older years lugged strange supplies across the hall, and even the staff seemed tense in a way she couldn't quite name. So one breakfast, she eyed her bowl of sludgy porridge more grey than usual and leaned toward Emil. "What is everyone preparing for?" she asked, prodding the porridge as though it might answer for him. Emil opened his mouth, but before a single word could escape, two tall shapes descended on the third-year table with all the subtlety of attacking griffins. "There you are," one boomed, slapping Emil so hard on the back that he nearly face-planted into his plate. It was Alexander, Emil's brother in the 5th year. Artemius, a 6th year, followed behind him with a more practiced swagger, smoothing back his hair as though the entire school were watching his entrance. They were similar enough to clearly be brothers, with their dark blonde hair and angular faces, but Hermione would have never guessed Emil was related to them if she had not known. Both of them bore down on Hermione the moment they spotted her. "Well, well," Alexander said, waggling his eyebrows at Emil. "Our little Emil's become quite the charmer, but sticking to the same girl now, that's a losing strategy. Especially a half Artemius elbowed him." "Enough," he said through a too bright smile, stepping forward to offer Hermione a polite nod. "Artemius Novak, and this oaf is Alexander. Sorry about him. He was raised around trolls." Believe me, it was quite an emotional day for the family when he was finally returned, wasn't it, Emil? He returned, Emil asked with mock shock, looking around. "You must be still in the denial stage. Sometimes I can still hear him, though feel his presence, right here," said Alexander. "Almost like he's with us right now, looking up at us," and smiling, Alexander snorted, and Hermione gave the brothers a tight smile before asking her question once again. "We're preparing for something, aren't we? Everyone is." "The dark days," Artemius said, pulling himself up a little straighter. "Polar night is almost upon us. Soon it'll be night all the time, no sun at all." "At all," breathed Hermione, her eyes wide. "At all," he confirmed, grinning. "Best weeks of the year," Alexander declared. "We get celebrations, feasts, competitions, oh, and the wild hunt," Hermione blinked. "The wild hunt," both older brothers grinned. "It's tradition," Artemius said. "Upper-year students, the braver ones, that is, head into the deepest parts of the mountains with Master Rommel. Magical creatures, ancient spirits, beasts that lurk where the sun hasn't touched in centuries. We hunt them," Alexander finished proudly. "Real monsters, not those pathetic mice you third-years practice your curses on." Hermione felt her stomach tighten. "You kill them." "Well, yes," Artemius said with a shrug. "Some of them, depends what we find." "So sensitive," Alexander teased, before turning the full force of his grin on Emil. "Just like our little brother here. He couldn't even kill a spider once. Set it free outside. Can you believe that?" He'd never survive the hunt. Emil flushed deep crimson. "It was harmless, and it was in my sock." "That was the point," Alexander cackled. Hermione bristled on Emil's behalf, but the brothers were already barreling on. "Oh, and there's the Huldra chase," Alexander added, leaning back as though expecting applause. "The what?" Artemius smirked, clearly proud of this one. "Unofficial tradition. Sometimes during the hunt, a Huldra shows herself. Mountain nymphs, they look like really beautiful women. If you catch one, you get a kiss," Alexander finished, winking. Hermione's nostrils flared. "Chasing a woman through the forest to force a kiss out of her. How is that a tradition and not a—" "Oh, don't get your knickers in a twist," Alexander laughed. "Huldra aren't people. They like the attention." A squawk came from Hermione, but Emil tried meekly to steer the conversation away from disaster. "You were asking about the festival, Hermione." But that did not deter Hermione. She furiously lectured the brothers in between asking them more questions, until they finally left. Still, as the dark days drew closer, even she proved susceptible to the cheer of the season. There was something infectious about the fortress shifting from its usual stern silence into a humming, crackling anticipation. But Hermione's excitement had very little to do with the festival. For the first time since term began, Rituals class was not going to be an hour of rereading the same textbook pages while Master Vaughan dozed in his chair like an ancient, scowling gargoyle set Tarsnor. No rumor had it that today they were finally going to perform an actual ritual. She nearly vibrated through breakfast. By the time she arrived at the rituals classroom, breath puffing in excited clouds, she found the strict stone chamber transformed. The desks pushed aside, the floor cleared and scrubbed, and Master Vaughan awake. Standing beside many shallow basins of shimmering powder, his grey eyes gleamed with a dour, almost suspicious awareness, as though he feared someone might accuse him of enthusiasm. "Ooh, this is just fascinating," Hermione whispered, turning to Emil with shining eyes. "You did the reading, didn't you?" Before Emil could mumble out his answer, Astrid suddenly stepped up to them, beaming. "Nope, Astrid," Hermione hissed, scandalized. You can't just must. Relax, Hermione, Astrid laughed, flipping her hair. If it's important, you'll explain it to me anyway, right? You already love doing it when people don't ask anyway. Before Hermione could muster indignation, Vaughan's dry rasp cut across the room. Groups of 3, he said. You will perform the rite of first opening. A simple ritual, foundational. Very little can go wrong. Your objective, Vaughan continued, gesturing to the basins, is to harmonize your intent with the triadic structure of the ritual. Flame, breath, and form. No one attempts ignition until I approve your sigils. Begin. The class broke into bustling motion. Hermione, Astrid, and Emil gathered around one basin, kneeling as if it were an altar. Astrid peered into the powder. So we light it on fire? No, Hermione yelped. Well, yes, eventually, but not now. We have to imprint the sigil first. It's all about alignment. With what exactly? Asked Emil. With the principle behind the spell, she said, in a lofty sort of voice. The rite of first opening is based on triadic harmonics. The course book had nothing on that part of the theory, unfortunately, but the structure is quite similar to the sundered circle diagrams in Chapter 5 of Eskay-Jold manuscript. Out of the corner of her eye, Hermione caught Astrid rolling her eyes. But Emil, bless him, nodded as if he understood it completely. Still, she went on, gesturing excitedly as she slid her wand through the air. You see, the ritual isn't just summoning a spark. It's recreating the creation sequence, a transition from potential to actuality, like in Transfiguration or Alchemy, or, well, all magic, in a way. 3 parts: the ineffable principle, the animating breath, and the material realization. The powder only ignites if we match all 3. Aha, said Astrid, who had perked up. So it's cooking. Emil coughed into his sleeve to hide a laugh until Hermione turned her glare onto him. No, Hermione said. It's not cooking well, note entirely. It's more like weaving. We're binding the idea of a thing to the thing itself so it can become cooked, she said with a sage nod. I mean, seriously, I could set that basin on fire with an incendio now, much more efficient. No wonder Liv and Sophia chose to take beasts instead. For a moment, Hermione prepared to go off on Astrid. Then she remembered how Astrid had saved her from the wolf and so had to be tolerated. Look here. The triadic sigil has to be drawn clockwise, but not in equal thirds. The second angle needs to be elongated because it represents the descent of form into matter. That's why most students get a sputter instead of a flame. Astrid frowned. But the diagram in the book shows all the arms equal. Yes, Hermione said, beaming, because the printed diagram is simplified. But if you compare it to folio 48 in the Eskay-Jold manuscript, specifically the illustration of the triple gate, you'll see the same asymmetry. It means the ritual's second phase has greater metaphysical weight. So our sigil must reflect that. Emil blinked. Hermione, no one has taught us that yet. Well, it's obvious, she said. Well, it's obvious, marked Astrid, but she mimicked Hermione's sigil anyway. After only a few moments, and with a flourish, the pattern was completed. There. Now we align our breath with the central axis 3 counts in, 6 counts out, and then, Master Vaughan croaked behind them, startling all 3, you ignite. He peered down at their sigil, eyes narrowing. You elongated the second angle. Hermione held her breath. Correct. Although it allows much less room for a miscast finishing spell, Hermione nearly levitated. Most of the room had drawn their sigils wrong, some too narrow, some uneven, some backwards, and one group had somehow managed to draw a snowman. But Hermione's triad gleamed faintly, the powder shifting as though aware of its own shape. Vaughan stepped back. Proceed, Aperite, cried Hermione. The powder sparked, then bloomed upward in a sudden, perfect spiral of gold, rising like a tiny sun unfurling its wings. Both Emil and Astrid let out identical yelps, but Hermione simply glowed. Oh, she whispered, transfixed. That's beautiful. Behind them, Vaughan muttered something that might have been praise or arthritis, and yet Hermione's eyes were still on the still-burning fire. It was a simple ritual, one that did not have an exceptional effect. Still, Hermione had performed her very first ritual, and she was already hungry for the next, unfortunately, hungry in a much more literal sense as well. Because the moment she stepped into the great hall for the dark day's feast, her stomach complained loudly and Emily's head snapped toward her with a little squeak of alarm. Hermione went pink and folded her arms tightly across her middle, as if she could physically muffle her own digestive system. Astrid beside them let out a giggle. "You sound like a dying seal. God, there's no reason for you to be that hungry." "You're clearly well-nourished," she smiled before flouncing off ahead. "It's better than sounding like Alavingan, at least," Emil said, then flinched when Hermione shot him a look. I just mean Seals Aralaudi was trying to defend you all right. Never mind, just forget I exist." The Great Hall, mercifully, provided a distraction. It had been transformed for the Dark Day's celebration. Every torchwood was covered with deep metal shades, allowing only thin slits of blue-white witchlight to escape, casting long, skeletal beams across the vaulted space. Great braids of evergreen and blackthorn hung from the rafters, studded with chips of ice that never melted, twinkling like frozen stars. The banners had all been switched to the winter crest, midnight blue with a pale silver sun sinking beneath a horizon line. At the center of the high table, Headmaster Karkaroff rose from his tall seat, his robes shimmering like oil. As he glided to the podium, Hermione and Emil practically scampered to their seats. "Students," he said, in that high voice, "as we welcome the turning of the season, remember that with the deepening dark comes a change in the world around us. The sun will dip lower each day, until soon it does not grace our sky at all. The great dark presses against the walls of this fortress more insistently during this time." There was absolute silence in the hall, yet many students looked quite bored. Karkaroff continued, "You will, of course, continue your studies. However, I remind you that no student is to journey beyond the main courtyards without accompaniment. Groups of 3 and above only. No exceptions. Professors will reinforce curfews. The staff patrols will be doubled." He rested one hand on the podium, tapping it once. "The activity of Draugrs increases during the dark days. While the protections of Durmstrang are formidable, carelessness remains the enemy of survival." He smiled thinly. "We would prefer you all survive." For some reason, quite a few students laughed uproariously at this. After a few indulging moments, Karkaroff spread his arms wide. "And now let the feast begin." With a deep groan, the covered platter's lids folded back, and the smell of roasted venison, dark bread, beet soup, root vegetables glazed in juniper honey, and steaming mugs of mulled winter ale filled the hall. Another heartfelt protest erupted from Hermione's stomach. "I swear it sounded carnivorous that time," muttered Emil. "Oh, shut it," she huffed, but blooms of red appeared high on her cheeks. "I didn't get to eat lunch today. I had to go to the library to get a few books Mistress Merle recommended to me on the atmospheric charm." "You just had to?" Emil asked, laughing as he poured himself cranberry juice that seemed to be fighting gravity quite fiercely. Unbidden, Hermione's lips twitched. She tried to stifle that at once, instead asking, "What are Draugrs?" They seemed rather dangerous from the headmaster's speech. Emil stiffened. "Well, they're He scooted an inch closer, lowering his voice. "They're Scandinavian creatures. Sort of like in fairy, but entirely natural. In any area up north that has lots of grief or unfinished business, they just sprout, I suppose. I dunno. Still, they look really like corpses but different. Bigger, bluer, sometimes with claws. They hate the sun, so go into hibernation. Come dark days, they wake up on their own, because the darkness stirs them, and they're attracted to the fortress, so they attack." "They attack," Emil nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, but the enchantments are strong, like the headmaster said. Still, they're really big and strong, and mean, and they move faster than they should. Ooh, and breathe fire, and sometimes they scratch on the fortress walls and jump on the roofs at night. Not that I've heard it myself, I mean I have, but I try not to think anyway." He broke off when he realized he was babbling. Somehow, Hermione's bushy eyebrows jumped even higher. "And people just live with that. It's tradition," he he squeaked, and also geography. He began gulping down his juice. Hermione was halfway through a bowl of juniper-braised venison when a thought struck her so abruptly she nearly dropped her spoon. Emil, across from her, jolted with a squeak, but she ignored him. She looked at the other side of the bench toward Astrid, who was neatly slicing her dark bread. Then she cleared her throat. Astrid. Slowly, Astrid blinked before glancing at Liv and Sophia, who both looked equally surprised. Despite the incident with the wolf, she and Astrid had barely spoken outside class. And when they had, Hermione was never the initiator. It felt odd. Yes. Remembering that being polite involved beginning with small talk, Hermione said, "The feast is very nice, don't you think?" "It's the same dishes every year," Astrid said, smiling oddly. "Tradition. Not much is special here." "Well, I quite like tradition," said Hermione earnestly. Liv shot Sophia a look that said of course she does. Sophia, who had been enthusiastically eating her third helping of roast potatoes, didn't notice, but she perked up at Hermione's words. "Did you see the broom display earlier? They spelled the ice so it wouldn't melt, while the emberwings flew through 54 vertical loops. The dark-skinned girl's curls, even tighter than Hermione's own, bounced. I thought Varric was going to have a heart attack when one flew too close to her coat. That would have improved my evening," muttered Liv. "I don't think Hermione wants to hear about Quidditch," Astrid said, snorting, before returning to the girl in question. "You aren't right." "Because if you are, I don't know why'd you go tome," her eyes brightened. "Hermione, are you coming to me for advice about boys? If you are, don't tell me who it is right now, because Liv's here, and everybody will know within the week, won't they?" "That's not true," Liv said, pursing her lips. "I swear I didn't tell anyone about you fancying." Letting out a cough, Hermione interrupted. No, not boy advice. It's just weeks ago, in natural magic class, you mentioned that you and Lars were in the same dueling circle." "Oh, I did," Astrid asked, smiling and twirling her hair. "I didn't even know I told you that. So why are you mentioning that?" Hermione brightened. "Well, Emil and I are struggling a bit in dueling class." Emil choked on his soup, but Hermione pressed on, "so we wondered if the two of us could join your circle." At once, Liv went still and Sophia's eyes widened. Astrid's smile simply grew. "Oh, Hermione," she said, "that circle is advanced. Truly, the skill level is exceptionally high. We don't cater to well-remedial students." She gave an apologetic tilt of the head. "Only the talented can join. Sorry, I'd love to have Emil and you otherwise." "But you're part of it, aren't you?" asked Hermione, puzzled. There was silence in the vicinity for a moment, Emil's spoon clattering and Astrid's smile freezing. She set down her knife very carefully, her hand trembling as if she were forcing herself to do so. "Excuse me." "Well, you can't be all that good at dueling," said Hermione. "You're not even taking that elective, and all combative spells are taught in dark arts, and you don't do very well in that class. It'd make no sense if you were some sort of dueling prodigy." Trying desperately not to draw attention, Emil slowly slid down the bench. "Well," said Astrid, "it's true I don't take the elective, and dark arts isn't my favorite." She shrugged jerkily. "I suppose him in the circle because they like me, but that doesn't mean I'm incompetent. I'm quite quick with a wand, and I didn't freeze under pressure, unlike some people." "And don't you like us?" Hermione pressed, even though she knew Astrid and her were not friends. "Oh, please, Astrid. It'd be ever so helpful. Emil and I want to do better, and I think joining your circle would really help us." "What do I get then?" sighed Astrid. "Emil's happiness." Astrid snorted. "Oh, yes, yes, very funny," she said, shaking her head. "We both know who really wants to top the class ranks. If I'm to let you join, I'll need something. It's not even me being mean, it's just customary." "Like what?" asked Hermione, biting her lip. And then she added, in flattering tones, "I can't think of much I have to offer you, you've got so much already. I bet you know loads more than can be learned out of any book. Real, useful sort of skills." "Oh, stop it," Astrid exclaimed, blushing and shielding her face. "No need to elaborate." She paused for a moment, clearly waiting for something. Then she rolled her eyes. All right, you really need to learn how flattery works. Whatever, Hermione, just help me with my homework, I suppose, when I have a question or whatnot. Hermione stared at Astrid. That's all, she said blankly. What do you mean, that's all? Well, Hermione flapped her hand, at a loss for how to explain. You could have me already. I'd have done that if you'd simply said you needed it. That's what I mean. That's what I do with Emil when we study in the library. Emil, cheeks aflame, made a small sound rather like a deflating bellows. Not all the time, and you just make tiny editsy help with your German sometimes. Even Astrid gave a baffled shrug. Yes, obviously, but you never offered, and it'd feel strange to assume. Besides, she jabbed Emil over the table, smiling. If little Em here had asked to join just for himself, I'd have let him in free of charge. At that, Hermione's eyelid twitched, and Emil turned even pinker. But Astrid just began buttering a slab of dark rye bread with the unconcern of someone who had just made a perfectly reasonable statement. The feast around them rolled on. Bowls refilled themselves. Pitchers of steaming winter ale glided lazily down the table like tame bludgers. The enchanted icicles overhead cast glittering, star-like reflections in the students' cups. On the other side of the table, Liv and Astrid were now busy squabbling because Liv had asked to join as well, and Astrid had declined, claiming that teaching Liv to duel would be akin to giving a baby a wand. Laughter rose and fell, and Hermione was almost finished with her venison when up at the high table a chair scraped back. It was Varrick's. She rose, her silver robes fluttering around her, and began to slip away into one of the adjacent corridors. Hermione's pulse raced, and she waited for a few moments before pushing off the table and following Varrick. The moment she stepped into the corridor, the warmth of the great hall fell away, replaced by a draft that made Hermione shiver. Varrick's silvery silhouette was already gliding far ahead, her braids swaying with each swift step. Hermione kept her distance, footsteps light, her heartbeat uncomfortably loud in her ears. Just observe, she reminded herself. Don't engage, don't interfere. Just Varrick stopped. Hermione stepped behind a carved pillar depicting a very disgruntled troll just before Varrick's head turned. For one terrible second, Hermione was certain those black eyes had pinned her to the spot. But Varrick only adjusted her sleeve, pivoted fully forward again, and continued on as though nothing were amiss. She moved with increasing purpose now, down a narrow passage lined with ancient suits of armor. She stopped beside a particularly imposing suit of armor, a towering figure with a horned helm and a halberd gripped in gauntlets big enough to crush a quaffle. Without hesitation, she lifted her wand and tapped the armor once, low on the right knee. The metal groaned, and the entire suit stepped aside with a sound like grinding gears. As it shifted, a narrow, irregular opening shimmered into view. Varrick glanced over her shoulder once more, then vanished into the opening. The armor stepped back into place behind her with a reluctant clang, leaving no trace that anything unusual had occurred. Hermione stared, pulse hammering, before quickly scampering back to the great hall. Chapter 12, Christmas. With a pained cry, Hermione hit the flagstones hard, her wand skittering out of her grip. She whimpered, trying to reach for it, but she rolled just in time to avoid a stinging hex that would have taken her cleanly in the shoulder. Morgenstern, yield. Fat chance of that, she thought, flinging out her hand, fingers brushing her wand just as another spell cracked past her ear. She snatched it up, scrambled to one knee, before crying, "Stupefy!" Her spell blazed across the room, only to be sliced aside midair by a perfectly timed counter, the red jet dispersing in a burst of harmless sparks. Hermione's stomach sank, and she barely had time to suck in a breath before a disarming charm smacked her backward so violently she saw sparks. For a heartbeat, she truly thought she might black out. Then that loud voice came again, maddeningly relaxed. "All right, Morgenstern, that's enough for one round." Hermione blinked dazedly up at the tall boy who was twirling his wand. She could not even see a single stray hair in Lars's blonde hair. "Up you get," Lars said, offering a hand. Hermione slapped it away and pushed herself upright, wobbling only once. I want another round, she gasped, brushing dust from her uniform. Another, Lars laughed. Hermione, that was 6 in a row. I know that, she said tersely. And I need one more. Why? He teased, leaning forward. Trying to impress me. You know, if you want to spend some extra time with me, you don't need to do all of this. Hermione's eyes narrowed. I need to be top of dueling class. Don't flatter yourself. A few of the Crimson Circle members, lounging along the perimeter of the practice hall, laughed at the tireless third year. Emil gave her an exasperated look from where he was attempting to memorize hex diagrams. Astrid, hovering over Emil's shoulder, rolled her eyes before whispering in his ear. They both fell into giggles. Lars raised his eyebrows, grinning. You're in your third year, right? You really think you can beat me? Yes, said Hermione. Not soon. But eventually. At that, Lars looked delighted, and he barked out a laugh. All right, then. He stepped back into stance. Show me. It's fun beating you up anyway. You know, I even made up that rule about not being able to cast the cushioning charm just to mess with you. Did you seriously not notice everyone else doing it? Her nostrils flared, making Lars only laugh harder. Funny, Hermione ground out, squaring her shoulders. When I surpass you in dueling, you can always comfort yourself with your own hilarity at least. Now are you ready or too busy giggling? Lars saluted with his wand, still grinning. Begin. As Hermione left the dueling hall, she walked stiffly, every movement a reminder of exactly how many times Lars had slammed her into either the floor or the wall. Her ribs ached, her shoulder throbbed, and she was sure a bruise was forming somewhere unpleasant behind her left knee. Emil hovered at her side, clutching his books, while Astrid swanned ahead of them with her cloak wrapped around her hips rather than her shoulders. A baffling decision, considering the corridors were colder than usual and at Durmstrang was already frigid. Witchlights along the walls burned with unnatural brightness, their glass spheres glowing like captive stars. Outside the tall, narrow windows there was nothing but complete blackness. Hermione, Emil said quietly, maybe you should take a break. For a day or two, you're limping. Not limping, said Hermione, limping quicker. You could rest, Emil tried again. You're already doing brilliantly. Master Rommel will still be impressed without you getting incinerated in the process. I need to be top, she insisted, tightening her jaw. Not second, not almost. Top. Hermione had not learned a foreign language, faked an entire lineage, deceived both Durmstrang officials and her parents, and sat through admissions examinations with a forged name and a newly invented life, just to scrape by. She hadn't left everything behind to bay ordinary. Astrid hummed cheerfully, turning on her heel to walk backward so she could face them. Well, that was an exciting session, she chirped. And wow, Hermione, you just have to teach me your tricks, the way you had Lars wrapped around your finger. I mean, did he even do anything but flirt with you? He wasn't flirting with me, exclaimed Hermione, spots of red blooming high on each cheek. He was beating me senseless. It's rather worrying you think the two are the same. Oh, stop it. He absolutely was. He only teases like that when he's interested. Emil made a choking sound, he was patronizing. Hermione said firmly. Astrid arched a brow. Yeah, sure. But did you at least just once consider giving in? What? No. Astrid leaned in conspiratorially, voice dropping even though they were alone. Because if you did, I might just have to invite you for a romantic evening stroll outside the fortress walls. She fluttered her lashes. And let a Draugr nibble on you a bit. Just a bit, though. Hermione and Emil exchanged a wide-eyed look. Oh my God, Astrid squealed. Look at your faces. Oh, come on, I'd never really do that, she beamed at Hermione. You're my fourth closest female friend, you know. Who's in the top 3 besides Liv and Sophia? Emil asked, tilting his head. Ivana. What? She's nice, but as if. Ivana has all the brains of a griffin. The beak, too. It's my mother, of course. Oh, said Hermione, her bushy eyebrows raised. I suppose that's quite lovely, having your mum as your best friend. Just as they were approaching the wide library doors, Astrid burst into another fit of giggles. Best friend? She's third on that list at best. And that's me trying to benecer. Seriously, if you stop being such a man-stealing slag, you'll be above her in no time. Soon enough, they settled into their usual table. It was near the household charms section and tucked just beneath a glowering bust of some long-dead headmaster. Emil and Astrid immediately spread their arithmancy notes across the surface, numbers, sigils, and spell diagrams spilling everywhere. Hermione took one look and sighed. Agrippa's method isn't difficult if you actually begin your homework before the last hour, she said, sniffing slightly. Both Emil and Astrid froze in unison, guilt painted across their faces. MMHMM, Hermione added, unimpressed, as she pulled from her satchel a tome roughly the size of a baby troll. The embossed title read, The Theory and Praxis of Cyclonic Conjurations. She set her elbows on the table, oblivious to the cold creeping through her sleeves, and sank into the book. For a blissful while, everything was perfect. Across from her, Emil and Astrid scribbled numbers, muttering to each other as they attempted to apply Agrippa's sevenfold convergence to the hypothetical simultaneous hit of a blinding hex and stunning spell. So if the stunning spell is cast with equal wand velocity, Emil murmured, then the impact resonance is doubled, Astrid suggested, tapping the page with her quill. No, that's if it's sequential, not simultaneous, said Emil. For many minutes, the only sounds were scratching quills, quiet whispers, and the soft turning of ancient pages. But all good things must come to an end. Astrid gave a long, theatrical groan. Ah, my brain is melting. It's not melting, Emil said. Just slightly overheating. Astrid rolled her eyes. Come on, let's have a break. Let's not, said Emil, pursing his lips. We really are behind in a sudden motion. Astrid's wand was out. Emil groaned. Seriously, Astrid, please don't. Who has the bigger wand? She asked, smirking. Whoever has the biggest wand gets to decide what we do. Wand size means nothing, Emil muttered, his cheeks pinkening, but he still pulled out his own wand. It's about the power of the wizard, not the length of the wand. They lined up their wands then, and Astrid let out a whoop of glee when hers was proved to be the longest, despite the difference being quite obvious. Ha, now you have to follow me, and I say it's break time. Emil frowned. You never said it's about the longest one, though, just the biggest. Look, mine's much thicker. Oh, asked Astrid, because last night your mum certainly wasn't complaining about the thickness of my wand. Really? That's funny because last night, your mum, Hermione looked up from her book, glaring at the both of them. Honestly, she said sternly, if you two spent half as much time revising as you do comparing woodwork, you might actually pass your exams. Astrid grinned. Oh, look, Emil Professor Smallwind has spoken. At once, she and Emil burst into yet another fit of giggles. Hermione's eyes narrowed dangerously. Small what? Oh, don't mind her, Emil said quickly, though he was clearly fighting laughter. Astrid's brainets mostly steam at this point. Overheated, remember, just stating facts, said Astrid, wiggling her eyebrows. Hermione, your wand is adorable, perfect travel size, fits every holster, gets the job done. Hermione, who had opened her mouth to deliver a righteous scolding, let out an indignant squawk. My wandy's perfectly average. She reached into her satchel and drew it out. 10 3/4, and even if it were small, that wouldn't mean anything. You two are such children, you know that. Guess Emil's the new small wand, said Astrid, giggling. She peered at Hermione's wand then. Ha! I never noticed how weird it is. Yeah, Emil said slowly, leaning in. Are you sure that's even a real wand? Of course it's a real wand, Hermione whispered, before looking down at her wand almost self-consciously. It's made of vine with a dragon heartstring core. Why? Does it look odd? Vine, Astrid asked, looking baffled. There's wands made of vine. How? It's not even real wood. Emil's eyes widened. Oh, but Hermione's English, isn't she? What does that matter? Druids, didn't they love vines and plants? I think I remember Thalberg mentioning something about that. I mean, regular trees are plants too, for a moment. Hermione was ready to deliver a lecture on how the Druids had considered anything with a woody stem a tree. But her need to teach snagged suddenly on a far more dangerous thought. Her wand looked odd to the continental eye, but she'd forged a certificate from Gregorovich's shop, hadn't she? It had seemed logical at the time, as an altered Ollivander certificate could have connected her even more closely to her true identity. Still, who had actually seen her documents? The Magister, of course, perhaps Master Capel, hopefully not Headmaster Karkaroff. Still, her stomach twisted uncomfortably. She smoothed her expression into something imperiously calm and tucked the wand away. "If you two require a break from acting like baboons," Hermione said primly, "we may as well discuss something useful." At that, Astrid perked up. "Ooh, a secret." "Do tell." Hermione leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "There's a hidden passage behind the statue of armor off the right corridor beside the Great Hall. I saw someone enter a few days ago." Emil blinked. "You found it? Is it a tunnel, a crypt, a smuggler's passage?" "A torture chamber," gasped Astrid. Hermione allowed herself a small, smug smile. "I haven't gone in yet, but I assumed it must lead somewhere fascinating." "Oh," said Emil awkwardly. Hermione frowned. What is that "oh" supposed to mean?" "It's just," Emil rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Hermione, it's the staff room." "Thewhat, the staff room," Astrid repeated, patting Hermione's hand with mock sympathy. "It's where the professors go to drink tea, complain about us, and probably have affairs. I mean, have you seen Varric and Raskov together? The tension's off the charts. That's ridiculous. Why would there be a secret passage to the staff room?" "Privacy," offered Astrid. "Convenience," added Emil. "So students don't wander in. I mean, Alexander snuck inside once." He lowered his voice dramatically. "Master Thalberg caught him," Hermione swallowed. "And 20 lashes. 20. Oh, he's fine," Emil said quickly. "He couldn't sit for a week, but he deserved it. He said Master Thalberg was reading some kind Opher-Romance book. You know, the type with shirtless centaurs on the cover. But I mean Thai's one had centaurwomen, though." Astrid got quite giggly once again, and Hermione drew in a deep, but disgusted, breath and returned to her book, just as Emil and Astrid, refreshed by their ridiculous break, leaned toward each other and began whispering excitedly even more. Christmas was almost upon Durmstrang. The frost had long since claimed the windows, but there was still no light to even veil. It was still a permanent night outside. On the first night of December, she lay in bed, half asleep, when the banging started. It happened late, when a steady thump rattled the window beside her bed. Hermione sat up tense. Puck lifted his head from her pillow, tail twitching. Probably a branch, she told herself. Then she remembered there were not trees close enough to tap the windows anymore. The only one that had been was now felled from a Draugr attack. And so, heart pattering, she slipped out of bed, her pink nightgown rustling as she padded across the cold stone floor, and very bravely she felt pulled back the curtain. A dead, blue-white face stared back at her. It had empty eye sockets, and its frost-bitten skin stretched too tightly over bone. The tower climber had pressed itself flat against the glass, gnarled fingers tapping as though politely requesting entrance. The creature's thin, blackened mouth twitched, just a little, as if disappointed not to be invited inside. Hermione shrieked. Across the room, Iva rolled over. "Please," she muttered, "not in the middle of the night. Also, turn off the lights already. Iva, there's a oh God, it's a Draugr." Iva yawned. "They wander. Ignore it. Turn the lights off." Immediately, Hermione did, before scrambling back into bed, clutching Puck like a furry shield. The troll cat purred, burrowing under her chin, and Hermione spent the rest of the night wide-eyed and listening for tapping that never came again. Yet, despite the night terrors lurking beyond the windows, Durmstrang was determinedly merry. Fir boughs were draped in the corridors, and enchanted frost blossomed over the vaulted ceilings like falling stars. Students bustled everywhere, chattering about competitions, seasonal duels, and the annual snow beast sculpt-off, where last year a group of fifth-years had animated a giant frost wolf that broke 3 benches and bit someone's cloak clean off. Hermione tried not to be impressed, but she failed. Christmas crept even into lessons. In charms, Hermione had been allowed to show off her perfect snowflake-making charm, one of the many extracurricular weather spells she had been reading up on, and Master Vaughan had been almost excited as he had them perform a ritual on dead oxen. He had slaughtered himself to bless the grounds come summer. Even Capel showed some Christmas spirit, having the class turn a golden bauble into any Christmas creature they like, provided proper justification. Most of the class, who were still stuck on invertebrate beings, did not know what to do until Ivan Petrov had started telling the story of the Christmas spider. Conrad, though, had made a small owl in a matter of minutes. Hermione, wanting to impress Master Capel, had taken most of the class period figuring out how to pull off a simultaneous transfiguration, producing two robins at once by the end. By the time St. Nicholas Day rolled around, the entire student body awoke to small burlap bags at the foot of their beds, each one stuffed with sugared almonds, chocolate coins, and gingerbread shaped like little witches on brooms. Well, perhaps the entire student body was a slight exaggeration. For Thesa's students, the lowest-ranked students, there were no treats to be found. Instead, baby Krampuses all at least half a meter tall, shaggy, horned, red-eyed, and shrieking with impish glee charged around their dormitories, yanking blankets, biting ankles, and dumping soot over pillows. One sprinted down the North Tower Hall with someone's boot in its mouth. "They're adorable," Astrid cooed, as she and Hermione walked together to breakfast, watching three first-year Issa's boys sprint past, pursued by a few chittering, goat-legged baby Krampuses, who carried twigs as they gleefully swatted the boys' ankles while shrieking with demonic delight. "And you think Pucky's a monster?" Hermione asked disbelievingly, clutching her bag of sweets protectively. "You know the milk Puck's always lapping up. He would literally love it 10 times better if it was stolen. Specifically, if stealing it made an enemy of his mistress starve." For once, Hermione had no response. There was a long, low moan of wind rolling across the ramparts and rattling every shutter in the fortress on the morning before winter break. Hermione felt it in her bones when she woke the strange weight of a building preparing to empty itself of most of its inhabitants. She had chosen to stay. She missed her parents terribly, but her forged identity had boxed her in neatly. They believed she was attending a continental boarding school, and going all the way to England would mean forcing them to buy train and plane tickets she would not truly need just to see them for 2 weeks. And beyond that, going back to London meant facing the lie. At least here, the lie had purpose. Here, she had work to do, still seeing trunks thumping down staircases and students bundled in thick fur cloaks made something twist inside her. Even Emil was leaving, which stung more than she admitted. Most of the Crimson Circle was as well, Lars included, which meant, maddeningly, that Hermione would be spending 2 whole weeks without anyone to duel. Of course, perhaps this was a good thing. It was getting rather tiring, getting beaten up over and over again. She sighed hard enough to fog the air as Iva finished tying the clasps of her travel cloak. The girl glanced over. "Well," Hermione tried. "Safe travels. I hope you have a wonderful holiday with your family." Iva nodded once. "Try not to scream at windows until January." Hermione went faintly red. "That Draugr jumped out at me." "It didn't jump," Iva said calmly. "It pressed its face on the glass, slowly. Perhaps turn down the lanterns next time." They attract them. And with that extremely underwhelming farewell, Iva lifted her trunk and walked out, leaving Hermione to awkwardly follow her down to the entrance hall, where practically everyone was gathered. Lars was surrounded by his fellow Crimson Circle members, all bidding each other a boisterous farewell until Astrid descended upon him like a blonde, perfumed hawk. "Lars," she sang, seizing his arm with both hands, "you simply must drag me from home. You will, won't you?" "Won't you?" Lars, red-eared and helpless, made a strangled sound that could have meant yes, no, or a plea for rescue. "Anyway, what gifts will you give me?" she went on. "I don't ask for much usually, but since this is our first Christmas where we're both 14, which arithmetically means harmony and commitment, I don't know Ifris, I just don't know, Lars said, laughing nervously. You, asked for a lot in your wish list. Surprised you didn't go all Rumpelstiltskin and demand my firstborn too. Thought that part was implied, said Astrid, laughing as she wiggled her eyebrows. Lars's face was rapidly approaching the same red as his robes. Nearby, Emil stood clutching his trunk, watching the scene with weary disgust. Hermione hurried to him, ignoring Astrid draping herself across Lars's arm like a decorative shawl. Here, she said, and pulled Emil into a hug so fierce he nearly dropped his luggage. You are going to review the Agrippa tables over the break and write out the full proof for all the necessary collision models, because if you come back without it, I will absolutely drag you through remedial practice with Master Raskov. Emil snorted into her shoulder. Merry Christmas to you too. He pulled back, cheeks pink from both the hug and the cold seeping through the hall. All right, don't overwork yourself. Hermione gave him a lofty sniff. I never overwork myself. He looked like he was about to say something contradictory, but Master Capel called out for all travelers to gather. Students began filing out after him and Mistress Varric, down the long stone steps and into the blackness beyond the protective enchantments, where the portkeys could activate. Lars gave Astrid one last bewildered wave as she blew him a kiss so dramatic that several other students giggled, and Emil gave Hermione a small, earnest smile before hurrying out. The great doors boomed shut, the sound echoing through the suddenly near-empty hall. The few students left all clumped off into groups, and Astrid bounded towards Hermione. She was staying due to her mother, a healer, being invited to some prestigious conference in Zyla for her research. So, she said, lacing her fingers behind her back. Did I play too hard to get with Lars? Hermione stared at her. Astrid, you physicolopined him against the banister. I'm sorry, that was a yes or no question, and I didn't hear a yes or no. Could you stop speaking in riddles, maybe? And so, with an exasperated sigh, Christmas at Durmstrang had officially begun. It seemed that although Hermione and Astrid were not particularly close friends, in the absence of any other alternatives, Astrid had decided Hermione was her new best friend. They spent hours together in Hermione's dormitory, and even spent a good while transfiguring festive outfits for Puck. He looked slightly less malicious than usual, with a tiny, ridiculous coat and bright red conic hat. The two girls giggled over Puck's latest attempt to wriggle free from yet another festive humiliation, Hermione trying to put tinsel on him like a scarf. Astrid, who normally regarded the troll cat with suspicion bordering on religious dread, had finally thawed just enough to pinch his cheeks and declare him almost cute if you ignore the eyes. Puck, still stuffed into a knitted coat the color of holly berries, blinked slowly, pupils narrowing to evil-looking slits. Hermione scooped him up before he could bite Astrid's sleeve off. See, Hermione said brightly, cuddling him. He loves the attention. He loves plotting my demise, Astrid corrected, scooting a safe inch back. But I suppose Heis Fluffy. But as they spent more time with Puck, the trollcat got comfortable enough that he jumped into Astrid's arms willingly. Astrid melted almost at once. "Oh," she cooed, petting him, "Pucky-Wucky is coldy-woldy. Do you want an extra winter cloak? Or ooh, do you want extra shoosy-woozy? Hermione, get on it now." Hermione sniffed, but still took her wand out, waving her wand rapidly over a nearby parchment. "Don't patronize him. Speak to him normally, won't you? He's a cat. A cat created for the purpose of following instructions. Do you think the dark witches who create troll cats speak to them like this?" "Still a cute catty-watty," cooed Astrid, rubbing behind Puck's ears as he purred contentedly. The break passed in a strange, pleasant rhythm. Going to Hermione's dormitory, studying in the library, sharing meals in an echoing great hall that felt far too large for so few students. And spell practice too, of course. Hermione insisted on it, dragging Astrid to the dueling hall every afternoon, her copy af van Nahen Winden and Werbel Stuamentucht under her arm like scripture. "Telling you," Hermione said, rolling up her sleeves. Mistress Merle says that once you understand the principles of rotational airflow. Yes, yes, Astrid sighed, leaning dramatically against a pillar. Fine, dear little cyclone. It's not little, Hermione muttered, concentrating. Ventorum cyclonis. Air surged, the blue banners on the walls snapping to attention. And then a crackling whirl of wind spiraled into being much stronger than Hermione intended. Ahem, Hermio, Hermione. The cyclone expanded with gleeful disobedience, caught both girls around the waist, and hurled them into a spinning lift off the ground. Astrid shrieked, clinging to Hermione's arm. Stop, stop. At the last moment, Hermione managed to dispel the charm before they collided with the rafters. They dropped unceremoniously onto the mat, hair windswept, cloaks tangled, and Puck, who had followed them, sitting smugly atop a pillar, watching them with great satisfaction. What are you looking at? Hermione asked irritably, glaring at him. I got the spell mostly right. And it's rather tricky, you know. Later that week, snow piled waist-high against the fortress walls, and Hermione received a formal note from Mistress Merle. Report to the forest gate at noon. Hermione nearly danced down the corridor. Shechos me, she said breathlessly, as Astrid followed into the black darkness of the outside, bundled in her fur cloak. It's an honor she must think I'm mastering advanced charms unusually fast. She's using you, Astrid said flatly. She isn't trusting me, corrected Hermione, offended. She's handing you a tree and telling you to drag it indoors and cut everything off, Astrid clarified. That sounds like manual labor. It's tradition, Hermione insisted, cheeks flushed with pride. A pupil with impressive charm work brings in the Yule tree. Mistress Merle said I was by far the best in the year. And naturally, that should be rewarded with logging duties. Hermione ignored her entirely. It was far too exciting a moment to entertain cynicism. Just outside the forest gate, Hermione had to squint to see through the suffocating darkness that a snow-dusted fir stood waiting. She pointed her wand at it and cried, Mobiliabus. The tree groaned as if affronted but lifted smoothly from the ground. Hermione guided it through the courtyard, up the steps, and into the entrance hall with ease as Astrid followed behind, brushing pine needles from her hair. Well, Astrid said, once you cut all the branches and everything off, it'll be a perfect Yule log. Traditionally, it's a professor who does it, but I suppose Merle was so gracious she decided to delegate. Wonderful woman she is. Despite the sarcasm, Hermione glowed. The morning of Christmas broke not with sunlight, for there hadn't been any for weeks, but with the warm golden glow of witchlights brightening of their own accord, as if they too knew it was a special day. Hermione woke to the soft, purring weight of Puck sprawled across her legs, and more astonishingly, a tidy mound of parcels piled at the foot of her narrow bed. It was slightly worrying to Hermione how she had not noticed anyone enter her room. A brisk knock sounded, and before she could answer, Astrid swept in, already dressed in a velvet green nightgown embroidered with silver stars. She was dragging an entire sack of presents behind her, one nearly as large as she was. Good morning, Astrid sang, letting the sack thump onto the rug. I refuse to open a single thing alone. Misery loves company and joy loves witnesses. Hermione blinked. Goodness, Astrid, did you rob St. Nicholas? Astrid tossed the sack onto Hermione's bed and flopped beside it. It's the standard amount. Hermione hid a laugh. No, I really don't think it is. But I taught O.B., Astrid said airily, already hopping onto Hermione's bed. Quickly, they set to work. Hermione picked up the first neatly wrapped parcel. It had her parents' handwriting upon it, unmistakable even in the dim magical light. Inside was a lovely wool scarf in deep forest green and a simple desk timer, thankfully mechanical, so it wouldn't go haywire in such a magical area. Hermione pressed the scarf to her chest, smiling. Astrid's first gift was from a cousin. She gasped at the sight of a silver compact mirror. I can't believe she remembered, she cried, even though Hermione knew Astrid had sent out color-coded wishlist scrolls to everyone she expected a gift from. Politely, Hermione chose not to mention this as she opened Emily's present. which was a notebook with never-ending pages, and a new set of quills charmed never to blot. Hermione's heart softened at that. He had remembered how often she complained about smudges during examinations. She desperately hoped he would like her gift as well. She had sent him a beautiful brass cipher wheel, useful for arithmancy puzzles, and as she had informed him in the note, excellent for organizing revision schedules. By this time, Astrid was already on her fourth gift, eagerly ripping the box open. "Oh my goodness, boots! I never expected this." Her eyes shined as she turned to Hermione, looking as if she were about to cry. "Hermione, you know me so well." "How?" Hermione blinked. "You were telling me about the Wizard's Corner in Germany for 2 weeks straight. And then you told me your shoe size. And then you dropped a catalogue that had that exact pair circled with 5 exclamation points. But yes, when you sent me that wish list with this item specifically underlined, oh, I don't know, I suppose that's what really cinched it." Astrid held a finger to Hermione's lips. "SHHH, it's Christmas. Don't ruin the magic. Just play along, won't you?" A smile reluctantly came to Hermione, even as she pushed Astrid's hand off and turned to the next present. A small parcel wrapped in sky-blue paper held Astrid's gift to Hermione, a slim, silver charm bracelet. It glowed faintly for a moment as Hermione slipped it on. "What's it for?" asked Hermione. "It burns," Astrid answered, beaming, "but only if someone unfriendly grabs it, and it'll help you find your way if the Draugrs ever attack and blow out the witchlights. That happened once in 1708, you know." Practical and pretty, just like me. For more than once, Hermione was wondering as to how Astrid's brain worked exactly. But Astrid was too busy spritzing a bottle of perfume from Sophia into the air with delighted little hums to notice the strange look Hermione was sending her. "Anyway," Astrid said, after filling Hermione's room with the scent of jasmine, a faint frown as she looked down at the one unopened present Hermione had left. "It's sort of sad. None of the professors gave you a gift. I told you to not give them any, but did you listen? All it does is make you look like a sucker who gives things without expecting anything in return. That's like the opposite of the Durmstrang motto. That's not why one gives gifts," Hermione said loftily. "It's a gesture of respect." The gifts Hermione had given each professor had all been carefully chosen, an elaborately transfigured chest that rearranged its compartments at a tap for Master Capel, an enchanted snow globe for Mistress Merle depicting a perpetual miniature blizzard. It had taken Hermione an hour to perfect the enchantments, a charmed magnifying lens for Master Thalberg. In truth, these were not sent out of respect. They were sent so that the elegant cloak pin Hermione had gifted Mistress Varric with would look less out of place, so that Varric would not suspect Hermione of having set up a triggered switching spell on both it and Hermione's own cloak pin, so that, at the tap of a wand upon Hermione's one, the vibrational properties of the two objects would be swapped, working sort of like a magical bug. It had been quite a clever application, especially since a simple revealing spell would only show faint traces of transfiguration magic upon Varric's cloak pin, and upon untransfiguration, the silver pin would turn into a pebble. Varric would assume Hermione was cheap, not willing to spy on her own teacher. Still, there were many flaws with this plan. It assumed Varric would wear the cloak pin, that Hermione would know when to activate it, that an expert of the dark arts like Varric wouldn't cast more advanced revealing charms upon her own gifts, and, worst, that even if everything remained right, upon activation, listening was two-way. Varric would hear Hermione as well as Hermione could hear her. If Hermione made even one sound, she would be caught in an instant. But Hermione had to send it. She needed to know why Varric had threatened her and what she would do with Hermione's secret. Mistress Varric was likely going to be her professor for the rest of her Durmstrang career, and Hermione didn't fancy herself getting blackmailed every once in a blue moon to do ridiculous, petty tasks like sabotaging some school duel. Soon the room was filled with crinkled wrapping paper, ribbons, and the soft sounds of Puck investigating every box. She wondered if he was reporting this all to Varric somehow. But it did not matter anyway. A scarf from her parents was hardly a secret. At last, Hermione's hand paused over the one small parcel remaining. It was unmarked and wrapped in dark, heavy tartan. Before she could touch it, Astrid let out a shriek that rattled the window more than any Draugr ever could. Hermione, look. She thrust a velvet box inches from Hermione's nose. Inside lay a delicate necklace with a thin silver chain and a small red gem. It's Framler's, Astrid cried, bouncing on the mattress so hard Puck scrambled under the bed in terror. He thinks of me at home. He thinks of me on Christmas. Hermione, put it on me now, and pretend you're Lars by the Norns, do it. Do it now, please, I'm begging you. Sighing, Hermione lifted the chain and fastened it around Astrid's swan-like neck as Astrid hummed dreamily and closed her eyes. Say something in his voice, Astrid whispered. Something romantic, so I can pretend it's him. Go on. Hermione pinched the bridge of her nose, inhaled, and in her very worst attempt at Lars's accent, murmured, Astrid, you look very nice. Astrid wrinkled her nose. Hermione, that washerable, she said, and vaguely offensive. If Lars sounded like that, I'd probably contact the professors for my safety if he ever looked at me. But I might have to anyway, with how insanely obsessed he is with me. I mean, sending me jewelry. Seriously, she clutched the pendant, sighing blissfully. But still, Lars, what do you mean? Asked Hermione, raising her bushy brows. What's so insane about jewelry? You sent me a bracelet. For a long moment, Astrid simply stared at Hermione. God, you really don't know, do you, you poor thing? She asked, shaking her head. You see, a charm bracelet from another girl is basically a generic marker of friendship. And of course, something signifying I'm your friend is the best gift anyone could ever give you. A boy sending a girl a bracelet is pushing it. Even if they're friends, it's weird. Not even romantic, but just to. Enclace, though, she laughed. I mean what? I mean enclace, like a lace around the neck, enclace, a necklace, Hermione. Yes, I heard the word the first 500 times. I still don't understand the relevance. A necklace is the closest thing you can get to a ring without it being a ring, Hermione. He's basically saying he wants to marry me. Hermione looked at Astrid before bursting into laughter. Astrid, it's a necklace, not a proposal. Oh, laugh it up, said Astrid, but her cheeks were pinkening. When he's chasing after me in the halls, and my poor petite, you're one of the tallest girls in class, Astrid. Self can't fend him off, she went on. We'll see who was right. Who could have been saved from Lars's big, strong, long-fingered, dueling-ruffed, beautiful, wonderful handsif. You'd only listen to me when I said this means he's obsessed with me. It did not sound like Astrid particularly wanted to be saved. Hermione giggled even more. It could also mean he saw it in a shop and thought you'd like it. Astrid gave her a pitying pat on the cheek. Hermione, sweet, sensible, academically overdeveloped Hermione. Boys do not simply think of things girls would like. In fact, I don't even know why I added the clarification. Boys don't think, period. They do, and what Lars was doing was deliberately teasing me. I mean, putting silver on my neck. He's saying he really wants to put gold on my finger. Why are you laughing? Are you really not seeing what I'm seeing? Why? I don't get how, she joined in, laughing too. All right, Hermione wheezed. I think it's time I opened the last of mine before you send him your response to his obvious engagement attempt. She reached for the final present, the nameless one, and unwrapped it carefully only to find. Parchment, Hermione said blankly, holding up a scrap no bigger than her palm. Astrid leaned in. Is it enchanted? Hermione tapped it with her wand. Revelio! There was no magic upon the parchment it could detect. Astrid tried too, but again nothing. Then they both stared at it confusedly. Maybe, said Astrid, it's art. It looks like something someone uses to blot ink, Hermione said flatly. Maybe it's a riddle, like some deep, mysterious message. Hermione flipped it over, but the back was blank too. Right, she decided, tossing it gently onto her trunk. Dumb prank, I suppose. Such nerve, Astrid said, already reaching for the bag of gingerbread she'd unwrapped. If someone gave me garbage parchment, I'd probably cry. Because, let me guess, they'd be implinguara garbage and unworthy of words. Hermione, Astrid said, looking genuinely touched. You really do know me, Hermione snorted. Oh, whatever. Let's just focus on getting breakfast before all the good porridge goes. In our nightgowns? Asked Astrid. We're one of the only ones left, Hermione said, already slipping into her fuzzy white slippers. And yesterday, Ivan Petrov still had his blanket wrapped around him when we saw him. Who cares? They padded down the corridor, descending toward the great hall. The fortress felt hollow without the roar of hundreds of boots and voices. The usual echoing rumble thinned out into distant clatters and murmurs. Breakfast was quiet, almost cozy, and most shockingly, the steaming porridge finally did not have the consistency of syrup. She eagerly began eating, while Astrid started on the assortment of pastries. Hermione barely finished her bowl when something warm pressed against her hip. She sucked in a sharp breath. The scrap of parchment tied to the gold trail charm upon Puck's tag was heating rapidly, almost burning through the thin pocket of her nightgown. Immediately, Astrid noticed. What is? Oh, nothing, Hermione said too quickly, pulling her gown tighter. I left something in my room. I have to go. See you later. With that, Hermione bolted, slippers slapping against stone. Puck's trails were already far ahead when she reached the corridor. She sprinted after them non-etherless, but within a few moments, Hermione realized it was useless. Puck was going somewhere she could not. Her parchment did not show directions, but it was obvious for Hermione to deduce where he was that she was only a matter of meters away the staff room. Useless, she hissed, spinning in place. Unless Varric. If Puck was being called, it was likely because Varric wanted something. Because of Hermione. Her heart jolted, and she turned and ran faster until she reached her own dormitory. She darted inside, slammed the door through the lock, and pressed her back against it, panting. Her pin gleamed faintly from where it rested on the table. Hermione crossed the distance in a few steps, pulling out her wand and wrapping the metal firmly. The pin vibrated softer than sound bled through, faint at first, then sharpening into voices. Hermione froze, hardly daring to breathe. If she made a single sound, they'd hear her. I am doing what must be done, came a light female voice, Varric's, polite as always but with an unmistakable edge. Whether you approve or not, Capel. Hermione's stomach clenched. Capel's reply was a harsh whisper. You were explicitly told to stay out of the girls' affairs. I certainly should not have had to do so too, Varric. I am staying out of nothing, Varric answered, maddeningly serene. When a student needs help, I provide it. Isn't that what professors do, Master Capel? Or have you forgotten your duty? Wench needs help, Capel hissed. She'll ask for it. And even then Durmstrang has rules for a reason. I am your superior, Varric, and you will listen to me when I tell you to cease your efforts. Of course, sir. She sounded almost amused. I respect my betters. Such is the way of the world, isn't it? There was a sound of boots faintly scraping. You overstep, he snapped. As always. I can swear, if you do so much as breathe wrong, Karkaroff will. For an entire moment, Hermione was sure her spell had failed somehow. Then Capel's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. Foolish girl. The pin gave one last, sharp pulse, like metal struck against stone, and then the connection snapped abruptly, the room suddenly silent.